In the span of an hour, a massive aura swept through, drawing the attention of many emperor powerhouses who were venturing into the deep wilderness. Even from a considerable distance, these individuals could sense the formidable presence, and none dared to approach without careful consideration. Nevertheless, they promptly informed their respective clans or sects about the occurrence. Most of these powerhouses were either affiliated with the Elder Palace or acquainted with the emperors of the Elder Palace. News of the incident spread rapidly. In the deep wilderness beyond Qinghe, a Tier 6 emperor was engaged in combat, facing off against a Tier 6 emperor-level desolate beast. Zhong, the Vice Hall Master with the most accurate intelligence, quickly received the news. It was not surprising for him to hear about it. Qinghe? Zhong, the Vice Hall Master, wore a stern expression. He casually took out a jade slip and began studying the map of the entire northern region. From Giant Gate City to Qinghe, passing through the deep wilderness, it seems highly likely that it's Jian Wushuang. A faint smile appeared on Zhong's face. Leave immediately without alerting the 8 Gates transmission array. Head for Qinghe, Vice Hall Master Zhong said coldly. We must get there ahead of him. Upon arrival, everyone must conceal their aura. Whoever dares to expose even a trace of their presence will forfeit 10 epochs of remuneration. Yes, Vice Hall Master Zhong had guessed accurately. This wasn't difficult since there were only a handful of Tier 6 emperors. Asking around would reveal the truth. Since it was an unfamiliar Tier 6 emperor, the probability of a recent breakthrough was minimal. Even if it were a Tier 5 emperor breaking through, news would have circulated. The appearance of a Tier 6 emperor in the northern region was a significant event, requiring prior notification to the Elder Palace. Such powerhouses needed comprehensive monitoring, if not full surveillance. Disclosing their detailed information and seeking verification was necessary. What if the individual turned out to be an infiltrator from the Shadow Sect? Not only Tier 6 emperors but even many Tier 3 emperors had their records in the archives of the Elder Palace. Only through such measures could they achieve the oversight and control necessary to govern and secure the entire northern region. Otherwise, it would have long become a playground for Xinling. Just like the earthly realm, apart from the central region controlled by the temple, the other 4 major regions were practically the backyard of the Kuei organization, visible almost everywhere. Even in the Great Xia where Jian Wushuang once resided, almost all the top-tier powerhouses had some connection with the Kuei organization. Across the entire earthly realm, in terms of overall strength, Kuei even surpassed the influence of the White Tiger Temple. In the heavenly realm, especially in the current northern region, it was rare to hear about any Shadow Sect forces similar to the Kuei organization. It was mainly because the influence of the Kuei organization was deeply rooted in the mortal world, challenging to eradicate. Beyond the realm of mortal affairs, anyone associated was uprooted, and this extended to the top echelons. For instance, if the emperor of a certain sect had ties with the Shadow Sect, the entire sect's emperor would suffer. The severe cases faced direct annihilation, and even peripheral figures needed to be suppressed in prison. Those with no significant connections would be sent to mines for labor, only to be released after sufficient or had been extracted. It was a lengthy process. It wasn't that the enforcement hall was too ruthless, but only through such iron-fisted suppression could they be effective. Yet, despite these measures, some elements remained untouched. The group that rescued Jian Wushuang consisted of emperors planted by Xinling in the Elder Palace. Even the headquarters of the Elder Palace could be infiltrated, showcasing the extreme methods of Xinling. The enforcement hall's methods towards rebels were always ruthless. Especially Deputy Hall Master Zhong, one of the 2 Deputy Hall Masters. He was eagerly awaiting Jian Wushuang to fall into their trap. After arranging their strategy, they were directly transported to the supercontinent Dongzhou Continent, in Qinghe State. Their figures were elusive, and on Dongzhou Continent, there was even an ultimate-level powerhouse. Yet even that ultimate-level powerhouse failed to detect them. After everything was set up, Vice Hall Master Zhong patiently waited for Jian Wushuang to arrive. He also informed Wuxia of this information. Upon receiving the news, Wuxia expressed satisfaction. Good. Make sure to wait for Jian Wushuang's arrival. I will secretly arrange forces to assist you. Remember, you must preserve your lives, and do not let anyone else know about this plan." "Yes," Vice Hall Master Zhong responded, equally excited. He had long been impatient to capture Jian Wushuang. Capturing Jian Wushuang wasn't for the universe crystals but to prove himself. There was also the last shred of dignity as an elder. However, he was unaware that right after informing Wuxia of this good news, Wuxia immediately notified Jian Wushuang. In the deep wilderness, Jian Wushuang stood on a massive skeleton. The candle dragon claw penetrated the skull of the skeleton. Subsequently, an astonishing force of devouring directly assimilated a certain power contained within the skeleton into Jian Wushuang's body. Afterward, he sealed that force within a jade bottle. Jian Wushuang spread his hands, revealing 3 jade bottles and a small box. Within the jade bottles were the flesh, marrow, and divine body of an ancient desolate dragon, while the box contained the dragon's inner core, equivalent to a cultivator's origin source. These items were treasures, priceless if sold, affordable only by supreme peak experts. This ancient desolate dragon was probably the only one in the entire northern region, and he happened to encounter it within the boundary. Upon receiving news from Wuxia, he wasn't in such a hurry. Only after everything was arranged did he leave to pursue Gong Miaoyi in the north. With his speed, he would catch up quickly. Now, Vice Hall Master Zhong waited for him in the core area of Qinghe on the eastern continent, which was indeed troublesome. Originally, he planned to go to the eastern continent to engage in mining, then infiltrate the mines to rescue Gong Miaoyi's father. However, it seemed not so easy now. Since that plan wouldn't work, he would try another approach. If the eastern continent was not an option, he would go to the Qingzhou continent. However, he had already exposed his position and needed a way to deceive others. Jian Wushuang pondered slightly. 2 immense life powers separated from his origin source and flew toward a particular direction. During their flight, these 2 life powers transformed into 2 figures. One was Jian Wushuang, and the other was Gong Miaoyi. Both were clones. Escape? He was a professional, after all. Even if the Supreme Peak emerged, it wouldn't matter. He could still escape. After catching up with Gong Miaoyi, the original and Gong Miaoyi took out an ordinary flying treasure, disguising themselves as members of Qingniao Hall, heading towards the Qingzhou continent. Meanwhile, the clone had already reached the Dongzhou continent at an astonishing speed. "We're heading to Qingzhou." Though there was a slight deviation from the initial plan, it didn't affect the overall situation. Qingzhou continent. It was an ancient and desolate land with few cultivators residing in it. There were even fewer sects and families. Despite being larger than Liuzhou, the entire Qingzhou continent had only one medium-sized city. Internally, only one Tier 4 emperor presided. Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoyi, upon entering the city, headed straight for the mining team. The mountain range of the mine covered 10 great states, and judging by the route, it was much closer to the Qingzhou continent than the Dongzhou continent. In several great states near the mine, there were places recruiting miners. It never stopped, every moment. After all, relying solely on captured emperors was simply not enough. Recruiting emperor-level laborers was very difficult, often offering astronomical rewards but still unable to attract many. Later, the Elder's Palace came up with a solution. Any emperor wanted by the Law Enforcement Hall, as long as they signed up to mine for an era, could have their wanted status lifted, and there would be a reward. Because of this initiative, it had attracted quite a few emperors over the years. And Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoyi were among those who came in this way. Before leaving, Jian Wushuang specifically selected a pair of black and white twin auras. These twin auras were both top-level Tier 4 emperors, cultivating a very special technique. When combined, they could unleash the power of peak-level Tier 4. They were quite famous in the Northern Territory. Jian Wushuang obtained information about the 2 from Wuxia, lurking in a wilderness area of the Qingzhou continent. To replace their identities, he had to eliminate them first, then search their souls to absorb their memories in order to disguise himself better. "Here will do," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. "These 2 are good at choosing places. This place doesn't even have desolate beasts. Hardly anyone comes here. Gong Miaoi made a hand gesture, sealing off the nearby space. No traces should be left. There was a more cautious gleam in Gong Miaoi's eyes than in Jian Wushuang's. After all, this was related to rescuing her father. The spatial shift instantly brought out the black and white twin auras. The two were shocked. They had hidden here, yet someone found them. Could only be said that they were unlucky. One of the twin auras, a female emperor, smiled with dazzling bright teeth. Upon seeing the two unfamiliar emperors before her, spoke loudly, "Senior figures, could you bypass my husband and me? We are willing to enter the mine." The reason for choosing to hide here was not only because it was relatively concealed, but also because this place was very close to the mine. If things didn't work out, they could simply turn and enter the mine. Unfortunately, they made the wrong decision. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, and sword qi traversed through, directly piercing the two individuals. Both their physical bodies and divine bodies were annihilated, leaving only the fleeing origin source. Why rush to exterminate, senior? Spare our lives, and we are willing to serve you for a lifetime. The white-clad emperor had a strong desire for survival and kept pleading. However, Gong Miaoi's eyes were already filled with killing intent, and no one could stop her. These two were perfect substitutes, using their identities to enter the mine and then search for her father. Not only would the law enforcement hall not discover them, but they could also use this identity to further rescue people. "She's in your hands." Jian Wushuang then moved directly in front of the black aura. The opponent had an iron-faced expression. Although their physical body was destroyed, the iron-faced appearance remained, never revealing the original face. Jian Wushuang's ethereal large hand directly gripped the black aura, and then another hand reached out, grabbing the iron face, giving it a strong pull. Crack! The opponent perished completely. It surprised Jian Wushuang. This guy perished instantly after losing the mask? This caught him off guard. Taking advantage of the fact that the opponent's origin source had not completely disappeared, Jian Wushuang activated the power of devouring, swallowing all the shattered origin source into the origin source C. Black How. This was the true name of the black aura. However, with the shattering of the origin source and the collapse of consciousness, the memories obtained were all incomplete. Only a rough estimation could be inferred. Black Hao's life could be described as extremely splendid. When Tao Lord was a peerless genius of a certain sect, his stature could rival that of a Tier 2 emperor. This prodigy of the heavens, however, fell into the demonic path, a fact that perplexed Jian Wushuang greatly. Unfortunately, the memories acquired were incomplete. Many crucial recollections lay shattered, impossible to discern. A person from the mortal realm. Jian Wushuang's gaze darkened. The identity of this Black How was peculiar. He hailed from a secret realm in the mortal realm. The memories from the time as Tao Lord were relatively intact, situated within a sect in a secret realm of the mortal realm. After ascending to Emperor, the memories transitioned directly to those of the heavenly realm. Moreover, he inherited the supreme arts of the Black-White Divine Palace, becoming the Black Aura. Achieving the status of Emperor took a total of 100,000 years, reaching the top level of Tier 4. This speed astonished Jian Wushuang. Truly, a peerless genius. A Tao Lord capable of rivaling a Tier 2 Emperor, roughly equivalent to a Tier 3 Emperor after the Tao merge. Within 100,000 years, advancing from a Tier 3 Emperor to the peak level Tier 4 was comparable to ordinary inheritors. Although subsequent memories were somewhat fragmented, the secret of matters were lost, some individuals and events were still known. That would suffice, ample to confront the Elder Palace's investigation and questioning. On the other hand, things proceeded smoothly for Gong Miaoi. There were no masks or extraordinary artifacts on White Aura's face. After extracting all memories, Gong Miaoi's rising blood-colored power instantly obliterated the individual. Jian Wushuang inquired curiously, "How much does the memory reveal about Black Aura's background?" He still held the iron mask in his hand, a material of exceptional rarity, surpassing even innate treasures. It couldn't be activated or recognized, appearing no different from an ordinary mask when held. Yet, It could establish a connection with Black Aura's origin, suggesting hidden secrets. Gong Miaoi looked at Jian Wushuang with some surprise and replied, "It seems White Aura is Black Aura's disciple. 100,000 years ago, White Aura was still immortal, and Black Aura saved her life. Later, the two entered the ruins of the Black and White Divine Palace, inheriting the legacy of the Black and White twin auras. Subsequently, they jointly caused trouble for all living beings, with nothing particularly noteworthy. Perhaps I'm overthinking it." Jian Wushuang shook his head. The surface of the iron mask showed no signs of issues. However, internally it undoubtedly concealed some unknown force. Upon infusing it with his life power, there was a faint movement, albeit subtle. Although small, Jian Wushuang could sense it. Yet, currently, he lacked the leisure to explore the true purpose of the mask or unravel any peculiarities hidden within. He still needed to tidy up the traces in this place with Gong Miaoi before heading to the only city in the Qingzhou continent. "Let's go." Gong Miaoi nodded and followed behind Jian Wushuang, heading towards the only city on the Qingzhou continent. Only through the residence of the elders in that city could they reach the mines. The two moved swiftly. Despite disguising themselves as top-level Tier 4 emperors, they reached the city in less than 3 days, thanks to the speed of Tier 4 emperors. Qingzhou City, black and white. They did not bother to wear any disguise, and they boldly entered the city. Soon, someone recognized the identities of the two individuals. "It's black and white double auras. Quick, let's go. Don't let them catch us." "What are you afraid of? There are strong individuals from the Elder Palace here. Fear a demonic Tao Emperor." Emperor who understood the black and white double auras whispered, "You may not know these two. These ruthless individuals dared to kill even the people from the Elder Palace." Among the strong individuals stationed in Qingzhou City's Elder Palace, there is only one peak-level Tier 4 Emperor, and he can't suppress these two at all. Once the unique skills of the black and white double auras were displayed, they possessed the combat power of peak-level Tier 4 Emperors. Indeed, they were not afraid of a Tier 4 Emperor from the Elder Palace. In the Northern Territory, genuine elders were rare. Most were emperors recruited by the Elder Palace from the Northern Territory, holding the position of external palace functionaries. Tier 5 emperors held the status of elders. The true elders of the Elder Palace numbered only a little over 2,000, and half of them held high positions, not needing to go to the Northern Territory. They could stay in the Elder Palace unless there was a significant event that required their presence in the Northern Territory. Otherwise, they rarely ventured out. Yuanyang Lake, with so many cultivation treasures, who would willingly endure hardships in the Northern Territory? Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi arrived at the Grand Hall where the Elder Palace was stationed in the city. As there was no teleportation array, it was quite remote. The fact that a peak-level Tier 4 Emperor could be arranged to preside over it was already impressive. If it weren't for the existence of the city, the Elder Palace would be too lazy to station itself there. As they entered the city, the peak-level Tier 4 Emperor presiding over the place received the news and was immediately frightened. He promptly activated the formation and sent a message to the Law Enforcement Hall. Upon realizing that black and white double auras hadn't made a move and were calmly standing in the hall without any intention of attacking, he dared to come forward. "Black and white double auras. What brings you to this place? Don't you know that the Law Enforcement Hall is looking for you?" The white aura, disguised by Gong Miaoi, spoke indifferently. "We want to go to the mine. I wonder if you can arrange it for us." Upon hearing that they wanted to go to the mine, the Tier 4 Emperor immediately changed his demeanor. The formation was also withdrawn, revealing a kind and amiable face. He laughed. "Come, please come inside. We can discuss everything, and it's easy to handle." Jian Wushuang, disguised as Black Aura, seldom spoke. The impassive expression on his face was a casually crafted imitation. He didn't dare to don the genuine one until circumstances were thoroughly understood. The mask had already been thrown into the Skysite heavenly chessboard, where he used the manipulation of time and space to thoroughly suppress it within the fabric of time. The enthusiasm of the other party didn't surprise Jian Wushuang. He had prior knowledge about the mines. Recruiting laborers of emperor level was a difficult task. Having 2 tier 4 emperors voluntarily coming to mine, especially aiming to lift the wanted order, not only relieved the burden on the enforcement hall but also attracted a suitable workforce. It was truly a stroke of good fortune. At least the stationed emperor in this place could enjoy a carefree period. The outer court functionaries of the Elder Palace all had their tasks. If they failed, not only would they lose their original salary, but they would also have to bear the consequences. Even so, some people still sought connections to get a job in the Elder Palace. Mainly because, with the Elder Palace as a backing, they wouldn't lack resources from various aspects, and no one coveted that little salary. For instance, the Tier 4 Emperor stationed here was the Earth Emperor of the Qingzhou continent. Any cultivator who came to this place couldn't avoid him, regardless of their business. After Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi explained the situation, they patiently waited for the enforcement hall's wanted order. Along with the wanted order came a notification from the Longevity Hall. A Tier 5 Emperor personally came to receive the 2. Although there was no teleportation array, there was no significant delay. The Tier 5 Emperor had a flying palace with an eternal treasure. After nearly a year they arrived. After destroying the wanted order, the Tier 5 Emperor took the 2 with him, leaving the eastern province and heading directly to a large state near the connected mines. The northern Hanzhou. Just as they entered, Jian Wushuang felt a trace of chill. If the Qingzhou continent was like scorching summer with the land ablaze, then Hanzhou existed within a frozen world. On every surface they touched, there was almost no dust, only an expanse of ice and thick snow. In the sky, snowflakes drifted year-round. We've arrived. Both of you hold the tokens and follow these people to the mines. Remember not to disobey. Even in the mines, there are plenty of Tier 6 emperors. It's not a place for freedom. The Tier 5 Emperor of Longevity Hall was easy to talk to. After instructing the 2, he left. Beneath the mines, in the long line, there were hundreds of emperors. Both of them were Tier 4 emperors, somewhat conspicuous because most people here were Tier 3 emperors. Even more were Dao Lords. Emperors were responsible for mining, while Dao Lords were tasked with transporting. And the mined ore was not simple. Space fire abyssal stones. Jian Wushuang's eyes were intense. The space fire abyssal stone, rarely circulated in the 4 great secret realms, could be mined here in sufficient quantities for a day. You should know that, in the outside world, a space fire abyssal stone the size of a fingernail could be sold for 100 million cubic godstones. Mining 1 piece a day was already a lot. This was just one of the 3 mines of Space Fire Abyssal Mountain. And this place was just one opening of Space Fire Abyssal Mountain, an infinitely vast mountain with many openings. However, in Hanzhou there was only one opening. For one opening, the daily mining volume was 1 piece. Countless years had passed, and no one knew how many Space Fire Abyssal stones had been mined. This was a crucial treasure for refining treasures and enhancing divine bodies and physical bodies. Even with extensive consumption, the mining volume over these years was enough to supply the entire 4 great secret realms. Jian Wushuang was unaware that the 3 major mines in the 4 great secret realms were once plundered from the cosmic realms by the Qishan Temple. In their quest to seize these mines, the Qishan Temple had ruthlessly slain several universe masters. Even a special life form born and nurtured in the cosmic realms had perished. Unfortunately, by the time these mines were transported, the Qishan Temple was on the verge of collapse, unable to exploit them. It turned out to be a windfall for those who inherited the legacy. In the Elder Palace at the Grave God Mountain, any inheritor could purchase Space Fire Abyssal Stone at a very affordable price. For the refinement of the Beast God weapon, especially in crafting for the Spatial Beast God, the Candle Dragon, Space Fire Abyssal Stone were crucial. This time, if given the opportunity, he could plunder freely. After all, he was working for Jinling, and the latter wouldn't force him to give it back later. It's worth noting that since taking control of the mines, the Elder Palace had embezzled a considerable amount. Jinling turned a blind eye, indifferent to such matters. Taking a small share shouldn't be a problem. Only individuals like them dared to attract attention by mining Space Fire Abyssal Stones. Even the native emperor dared not glance in that direction. Once extracted, the stones were to be handed over. Anyone attempting to secretly absorb them into their bodies would face more than just instant execution if discovered. That was a serious crime. Not only would all those who were related to the culprit be executed, but their origin source would also be thrown into the eternal fire prison and tortured for the rest of his life. That feeling could be said to be extremely terrifying. Only this kind of iron-blooded method could suppress those who had designs on the mine. When the Divine Hall controlled the Northern Territory, the management here was even stricter. The core members of the White Tiger Temple were all puppets, and they wouldn't fill their own pockets. The people below didn't even dare to be greedy. They could only get some benefits when the Elder Palace was in control of this place. The ones in charge of the mine were the two halls of the Elder Palace. They were Longevity Hall, which collected ores, and Mountain Suppression Hall, which was responsible for mining. Not only were they responsible for mining, but they were also responsible for guarding. Although there wouldn't be a fool who would dare to rush over to snatch the ore mine, for safety reasons, there were still several Tier 6 emperors guarding it. Moreover, there were avatars of the 3 palace masters on the 3 great mines, and each of them had a supreme combat strength avatar guarding them. If anything happened, there was a special teleportation array that could allow the true body to descend at any time. It was very safe. Space Fire Abyssal Stone was no ordinary ore. It was too big, so it couldn't be stored in ordinary mustard seeds. It could only be placed in some containers that stored true treasures. Furthermore, they couldn't be teleported through the teleportation array. Every escort required a palace master to personally escort them. It was transported almost every 100,000 years. Jian Wushuang roughly calculated how many cubic units would be mined in 100,000 years. A few million cubic units of space fire abyssal stones at once. Its value probably exceeded 100,000 cubic universe crystals. A supreme treasure of such value would definitely require a supreme expert to personally escort it. The value of 100,000 cubic universe crystals, and if they were sold in batches, the value might be even higher. Even the Supreme Peak warriors among the natives would find it worthy of the risk. The person who escorted the Space Fire Abyssal Stone this time was Tai San's brother, Chong Feng Sword God, one of the 3 palace masters. His position was extremely high, and although his strength was ranked at the bottom of the 3 palace masters, the universe secret technique he created was already at the initial level. His strength could not be underestimated, and few of the natives of the 4 secret realms could match him. It's likely the other party had already left by now. Jian Wushuang had nothing to worry about. The avatars of those supreme peaks were on the mountain top, unlikely to pay attention to a Tier 4 emperor like him. Gong Miaoyi and Jian Wushuang followed the team and entered the mine. Outside the cave, 4 teams of experts patrolled the area day and night. 4 Tier 6 emperors led dozens of peak-level Tier 5 emperors. Even the native experts of Hanzhou combined would not be able to break through such a formation. Even if the experts from the Shadow Sect wanted to infiltrate, they would likely be discovered by the Law Enforcement Hall before reaching Hanzhou. Black Aura, these are your mining tools and this bag. Put all the mined space fire abyssal stones into it, and it will automatically record the minerals you've extracted. Your goal is 10 cubic units. Once you have enough quantity, you can leave. Ian Wushuang nodded without saying much. Holding a straight stick-shaped treasure and a small bag, he entered the mine. The days ahead would all be spent here. To leave, he needed to mine enough space fire abyssal stones. The wanted notice sent by the Law Enforcement Hall stated that he needed to mine 10 cubic units of space fire abyssal stones to lift the warrant. This was even after Jian Wushuang had given up the mining reward. If he wanted that reward, he would need 15 cubic units worth of space fire abyssal stones. He naturally didn't care much about that reward. He came here primarily to rescue Nieyuan. Through Wu's was manipulation in the background. The two arrived at the mine where Nieyuan was. Rescuing people was just part of the plan. He wasn't in a situation where he had no choice but to rescue. If the Shadow Sect's people found him now and wanted to take him to see Fugo, he would refuse and go with them. Unfortunately, even after such a long time, he had left many clues but still hadn't encountered the Shadow Sect. During his time in Giant Gate City, he left some clues. When he killed the ancient desolate dragon, he left behind a heavy power of all things. According to the methods of Xinling, they should be able to discover him. He continued down the mine. The top of the mountain had long been mined out, and now only the square of or had not been mined. The top part of the mine was only 10%. The true core of the mine was underground. His body descended, and he only landed heavily after traveling hundreds of thousands of miles. The substance here was very thick. Even an emperor would have to expend a lot of effort to destroy it. As for the extraction, it was far from simple. Otherwise, there wouldn't be specialized treasures for extraction. The rod was used to extract the space-fire abyssal stone. One needed to activate the treasure with their own power, then extract the stone. While the process might sound easy, the actual extraction felt like a daily large-scale battle. This was also why few emperors bothered to come for mining. The erosion of consciousness and strength was severe, and waiting for millions of years without any personal benefit left them drained. Although the rewards were generous, facing an infinitely valuable mine every day, revisiting insignificant treasures seemed trivial. Many people developed a sense of internal imbalance. So gradually fewer and fewer people came. "We've arrived. This is where we usually rest." Gong Miaoi walked at the forefront and halted. Jian Wushuang followed her gaze. Ahead was an extremely spacious area with a simple Dao arena. The profound origin source above indicated that this place was specifically set up to aid their cultivation through a Dao image. Jian Wushuang scrutinized it, noticing the Dao image had an azure dragon beast head. "Long Yi," he exclaimed in surprise. He hadn't expected to see the Dao image of the Azure Dragon Temple Master here. Perhaps, this was the Dao arena established by the temple in the past. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so specific, using their own people's Dao image. If it were the wealthy and powerful Elder Palace, they might even create a Universe Master's Dao image just to attract Emperor-level miners. Dao images were easy to refine. By using a portion of the universe origin source, one could create a simple Dao arena at the level of a Universe Master. It wouldn't be as austere as it was now. Below the Dao image, there were countless meditation cushions. On both sides of the Dao arena were some crude palaces, serving as trading places. There was another advantage to this place, which was that it was very convenient to buy any treasures. In order to provide these individuals with some motivation, there was a yearly target for the mined ores. Within the span of a year, each person needed to extract 1 pound of space fire stone. Anything in excess could be exchanged for merit points and also accumulated towards their personal mission objectives. The target for one faction was 100,000 pounds. If Jian Wushuang were to achieve the goal every year, it would take 1,000,000 years before he could leave. However, accomplishing the task of mining 1 pound per year was exceedingly difficult. It was quite impossible for those below Tier 5 emperors to complete it. Some unlucky ones would not even be able to produce 1 pound of it in 100 years. As they progressed, strength waned. Achieving 1 pound in a year became an unattainable goal, and a millennium seemed a monumental target. In most trading places, individuals mostly had to dip into their own pockets to exchange for treasures. Let's not deliberately inquire about information. Let's explore this place for a while first. Jian Wushuang transmitted his voice quietly. He noticed the change in Gong Miaoi's expression, worried that she might reveal something inadvertently. It would be troublesome if someone recognized him now. Gong Miaoi regained her cool expression and nodded. The two of them, holding their tokens, obtained a private chamber and began to engage in mining. Departing from the Taoist temple, they could move freely. In order to quickly understand the situation in this place, the two chose to split up. Jian Wushuang entered a narrow and dark cave. There were many small mines here, all of which were left behind by the predecessors after countless eras of mining. Jian Wushuang dived in. Glancing around, he saw no one. Then he continued forward. This place was like a maze. Intersections appeared from time to time. After an hour of walking, Jian Wushuang finally reached the end. At the end, 3 people were manipulating treasures to mine ores. Their brows were furrowed, and their bodies, despite being Tier 4 emperors, were extremely emaciated, with a waxen yellow complexion. There was still some semblance of humanity left. Just as Jian Wushuang was sighing, a palm appeared on his shoulder. "It's you? Black Aura." The person recognized him. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. Many memories related to the Black Aura were fragmented. Worried about exposing his identity, he remained silent. When he turned to look at the other person's face, he felt relieved. Fortunately, he knew this person. "Brother Xiangyang, what are you doing here?" Jian Wushuang pretended to be surprised. "Haha, since you're here, why can't I be?" Xiangyang laughed. "Come, this is not the place to talk. Don't be in a hurry to mine. There's plenty of time. Let me introduce you to some big brothers." This Taoist Xiangyang was very enthusiastic. The two were acquainted, having teamed up a few times when besieged by the righteous path. Both were practitioners of the demonic path. However, the black and white auras focused on gathering malevolent energy and cutting through all directions. Xiangyang, once a disciple of the Hahuan sect, became a lone cultivator after the sect was destroyed. Because he constantly plundered high-quality furnaces, he quickly attracted the attention of righteous powerhouses. During one siege, the black and white duo auras saved him. Xiangyang brought Jian Wushuang to a more open area where several people were mining, including 2 Tier 5 emperors. "Come, Black Aura. Let me introduce you. This is City Lord Feng," Xiangyang boasted as he introduced. "City Lord Feng arrived earlier than us, but the mines he opened are about to deplete." City Lord Feng, a handsome man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, exuded a heroic aura. "Black Aura greets City Lord Feng." Jian Wushuang understood. This was a way of paying respects, and it seemed that things were not as simple here. Where there are people, there will be conflict. And there will also be the martial world. Invisible, though there was no fighting, there were worldly affairs. Making friends is something needed everywhere. With friends, the road becomes broader. "Well, I've heard about you. From now on, follow me. There's still a place here. You can mine with Xiangyang." City Lord Feng nodded, then ignored Jian Wushuang. Xiangyang quickly thanked and then led Jian Wushuang to a corner to start mining. "Brother Black Aura, there are some things you may not know. In the mines, to quickly extract ores, you need to occupy advantageous positions. Look here. Compared to where you were just now, this place is at least 3 times more abundant. Your mining speed will be much faster," Xiangyang explained. Jian Wushuang understood it now. No wonder he was brought here to kowtow and acknowledge his big brother. So that was the reason. Within the mine, the distribution of ore was not uniform. Some areas had more, while others had less. The place he had just seen belonged to the lowest level of the mine. This area could be considered middle tier. As for the higher tiers, they were dominated by those Tier 5 emperors. To reach that place, one needed the strength of a Tier 5 emperor at the very least. Moreover, an introduction was required. Jian Wushuang didn't particularly care about this. But since he was here, he had to follow the unspoken rules. Stirring up trouble might lead to exposure and risks. "Work hard. We've just arrived. Let's mine at least a pound in the first year." Xiangyang was full of enthusiasm. His situation was not easy. He was captured and needed to mine 20 cubic space fire abyssal stone. Even at the fastest pace, it would take thousands of years. Compared to some cultivators sentenced to mine hundreds or even thousands of portions, it was already quite rare. As for Jian Wushuang's 10 portions, it was pitifully few. Jian Wushuang infused a trace of the origin source of the Tao of Darkness into the treasure, and then felt the power of the space fire abyssal stone entering the treasure. "Interesting." Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow. He instantly grasped the principle behind it. This treasure was called the Mining Soldier. Indeed, it was the perfect choice for mining. Internally, it contained the power of a black hole, capable of devouring all substances or erasing them. Visibly, it devoured the space fire abyssal stone and other materials on the stone wall, then removed impurities, leaving only particles of the space fire abyssal stone. Those particles were extremely fine. As for the energy he consumed, if calculated according to the ordinary Tier 4 Emperor of the 4 Great Secret Realms, It would indeed take a year to devour a pound of space fire abyssal stone. However, that was without rest. Initially, continuous consumption was possible. Not to mention a year, even 100 years without stopping was fine. But as time passed, several years would require a period of rest. A significant amount of time would be wasted in between. This also resulted in many emperors wearing down their consciousness, unable to mine even a pound of space fire abyssal stone in 100 years. According to the information he obtained from Wuxia, Nie Yuan had been here for 50,000 years. Nie Yuan was sent to the mines because he offended the Shao family in Hanzhou. The Shao family risen to prominence in recent years, mainly because of a son-in-law in the Shao family. The son-in-law had quite a background, and when Jian Wushuang learned about it, he was astonished. Vice Hall Master Wu Shan, a Vice Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall willingly becoming the son-in-law of a local emperor family was truly surprising. The Shao family was already a prestigious family, but it was only a superpower in Hanzhou. With Wu Shan's influence, it became a superpower within the northern region. With this relationship, the Shao family could dominate the entire northern region. As for Nie Yuan, he was unlucky. He came to Hanzhou for secluded cultivation with his disciple, and the disciple accidentally offended a Shao family member. That Shao family member happened to be Wu Shan's nephew. At first sight, he took a liking to Nie Yuan's disciple, Qing Luo. In Nie Yuan's nature, sparing the opponent from being killed was already considered lenient. If he had gone all the way, he might have met his demise by now. However, by crippling the opponent's cultivation and letting Wu Shan's younger brother go, he had truly stirred up a storm. Members of the enforcement hall personally apprehended Nie Yuan, and his disciples were sent to the Shao family. It was said that Nie Yuan's current state was even more desolate. In his early years, his Dao companion fell while pregnant, his disciples were taken away by stubborn junior disciples, and he himself ended up trapped in a mine. Moreover, Nie Yuan's mission involved obtaining 10,000 cubic space fire abyssal stones, a task that would be difficult to accomplish in just a few epochs. Nevertheless, Nie Yuan's determination was formidable, and after 50,000 years, he had managed to excavate 1 cubic unit. A man of hardship, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, Nie Yuan's daughter was still alive, sparing him the need to reverse time and space. Moreover, Gong Miaoi's strength was commendable. After this incident, he could recommend her to the Grave God Mountain. Although he had never been there himself, as long as he resolved the menace of Fuego, Zhenling should give him face. And in the future, the Qixin Temple would all be his. A spot at Grave God Mountain was just a minor matter. Jian Wushuang, while mining, also cultivated relationships with the 2 Tier 5 emperors, occasionally mentioning the Tier 5 emperors inside the mine. City Lord Feng saw that Jian Wushuang was quite knowledgeable and deliberately handed some space fire abyssal stones to him. In his heart, he felt elated and was willing to talk. The mine we are in is called Chenkuan Cave. Once, a great figure emerged here, the second ancestral master of the Shao family, Taoist named Chenkuan Ancestor. During the era of the Divine Temple, he supervised the mining in this area. Using only 3 epochs, he opened up this Chenkuan Cave mansion. City Lord Feng's face was filled with longing. Being able to open a mine was a significant achievement. No wonder the Shao family could dominate Hanzhou. And that was just the second ancestral master. The first ancestral master was even more remarkable. With Wu Shan as their strong backing, they could indeed rival the Nalan family of the Earth Realm, a family with several Tier 6 emperors and the presence of the Supreme Peak Ancestor. Unfortunately, the Nalan family was too arrogant and ended up being annihilated by the Azure Dragon Temple Master. On the other hand, the Shao family could maintain lasting peace, thanks to the formidable Wu Shan watching over them. No one dared to provoke the Shao family. The northern region, in essence, served as the backyard of the enforcement hall, wielding excessive power. The various branches of the Elder Palace focused solely on plundering treasures and cared little about the underlying dynamics. This led to the enforcement hall reigning supreme. Anyone involved with the enforcement hall could act with impunity in matters related to it. Many inheritors were willing to take on enforcement tasks, and even if they couldn't complete them, there was no real danger. Those demonic emperor-level figures who dared to kill external servants of the Elder Palace didn't dare to harm some of the enforcers of the enforcement hall. Once they did, they would be placed on the kill list. If it were a Tier 4 emperor, a Tier 5 emperor would be dispatched to pursue, and a Tier 6 emperor would step in for a Tier 5 target. If it were a Tier 6 emperor, Wuxia himself would personally take action. With such an iron-fisted approach, no one dared to openly offend the enforcers of the enforcement hall. The Xiao family was indeed extraordinary. Not only were they inherently powerful, but they also rode on the coattails of the deputy hall master of the Hall of Enforcement, ensuring their stability. After chatting with the city Lord Feng for a while, Jian Wushuang subtly brought up the Xiao family. The city Lord Feng sighed, saying, "People in the world label us as demonic path cultivators. But are those righteous sects really clean? I doubt it." This statement, Jian Wushuang spoke. It's merely a matter of taking sides. If one could have some connection with the enforcement hall, they probably wouldn't end up in a place like this. Tisk, it's good to understand early. Whether the waters in the northern region run deep or shallow, once I leave the mining area, I'll exit the northern region. This place isn't suitable for exploration. With one power dominating, there's simply no opportunity for us. Unless, of course, we become dogs like the Xiao family and serve the enforcement hall. City Lord Feng's voice carried a sense of reluctance. In the region where the temple was located, there was at least a balance between the forces of righteousness and demonic influences. Moreover, the temple seemed relatively fair. However, the northern territory was a different story. Jian Wushuang feigned ignorance and asked, "City Lord, how do you come to such a conclusion?" "Xiao family," Lord Feng sneered. "If it were in the past, I might have admired them a bit. But now, they've already incurred divine wrath and human resentment. The young miss from the Xiao family, you should be familiar with her, right? She's the daughter of Hall Master Wu Shan, one of the 2 vice hall masters of the enforcement hall." Jian Wushuang nodded, replying, "I know about her, but it seems she's not the direct heir of the Xiao family, right?" "Indeed, she's not the direct heir. However, after making it to Wu Shan, she practically became the heir. Her entire family line, including her little brother, became the main line. What her brother did is no different from practicing demonic arts. Yet he has been roaming free." City Lord Feng shook his head as he spoke. Even practitioners of demonic Tao found the actions of the Xiao family hard to tolerate. It was indeed outrageous. City Lord Feng seemed somewhat weary. He put away the divine weapon he had been excavating and found a clean spot to sit. Then, he took out a peculiar stick made of high-quality fruit leaves, and a flame flickered as he lit it with his nails. Inhaling deeply, City Lord Feng handed it to Jian Wushuang, saying, "Take a few puffs." Jian Wushuang waved his hand, uninterested in such peculiar habits. Instead, he took out a small square table and brewed a pot of tea for himself. The 2 of them sipped their tea, feeling quite at ease. Under the continuous prodding, City Lord Feng finally spoke about the matter concerning Nie Yuan. Although Jian Wushuang had a general idea of what happened, the details were still scarce. Originally, Nie Yuan not only crippled the nephew of Hall Master Wu Shan but also engaged in a battle with the Xiao family's current generation. The Xiao family's current generation was also a highly esteemed peak-level Tier 5 emperor, and they had a significant confrontation with Nie Yuan. Even though it was their own kin who was crippled, the Xiao family couldn't turn a blind eye. However, they didn't trouble Nie Yuan further and let him go. Yet Xiao Feng was relentless. He went to complain to his sister and, using the power of the enforcement hall, suppressed Nie Yuan. Nie Yuan's disciples were also taken away. It's a sad tale. Even the patriarch of his own family didn't want to deal with the matter. If it weren't for Wu Shan, he wouldn't have intervened. And in the end, he even let Nie Yuan go. Unfortunately, the power of the enforcement hall was too formidable. They directly dispatched a Tier 6 emperor, suppressing Nie Yuan. It was precisely because of this incident that City Lord Feng of the Northern Territory became thoroughly disappointed. After leaving the mine, he prepared to depart. Jian Wushuang sighed and said, "This Nie Yuan and the current head of the Xiao family, truly lives up to the righteous path. I deeply admire him. Haha, I admire them too. I heard Nie Yuan is quite young and was once the sword sovereign of the Xianxia Palace. It's just a pity. If the Xianxia Palace were still around, things might not have turned out like this. City Lord Feng continued. By the way, Nie Yuan often cultivates in front of the dragon image. I can introduce you to him sometime. He doesn't harbor much hostility towards us practitioners of the demonic path. Oh! Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, excitedly saying, Then I thank the city lord. It's a trivial matter. The two stood up and continued their mining. Jian Wushuang didn't hurry to leave and search for Nie Yuan. The place was vast, and finding Nie Yuan in the cramped caves was not easy. Moreover, searching for Nie Yuan at this moment would undoubtedly expose his identity. His two avatars had already been discovered, and Vice Hall Master Zhong was probably frantically searching for him. This place was also Vice Hall Master Wu Shan's territory, and he likely had set up a tight net. Once anyone suspicious appeared around Nie Yuan, they would surely suspect him. He had already discussed this with Gong Miaoi long ago, advising her not to be impatient. Patience was necessary. At least wait until Shenling contacted him secretly before taking drastic measures. With the help of Shenling, he could confront the powerful beings residing here. The true forms of the three palace masters could descend at any time. If Shenling wanted him, he would have to bring in Fuego personally. At that time, everything would be left to Shenling, and he would consider his mission accomplished. Unfortunately, nothing was that simple. In Hanzhou, Mirror Light City, inside a mansion of the Xiao family. Ha, Brother Zhong. I heard you came back empty-handed in the eastern province. Wu Shan sat in the main seat, accompanied by a breathtakingly beautiful woman, the Xiao family's young lady whom even Wu Shan had married. Vice Hall Master Zhong, upon hearing Wu Shan's mockery, remained composed. He simply took a sip of tea and calmly said, Wu Shan, spare me the sarcasm. Unlike you, I must capture Jian Wushuang. As if I haven't put in any effort. Wu Shan sneered, shaking his head. Although the two hadn't openly confronted each other, their relationship was far from ordinary. Wu Shan's original Dao companion was the elder sister of Vice Hall Master Zhong, who happened to be the main wife. Unfortunately, she perished in ancient times during the construction of the Qishan Temple. Otherwise, Wu Shan wouldn't dare take a concubine. He would have shattered the concubine's head. Even now, with his sister-in-law gone, seeing Wu Shan with a new love made Vice Hall Master Zhong uneasy. What's the situation inside the mine now? Vice Hall Master Zhong turned to the main topic. In his view, Jian Wushuang had probably entered the mine, likely the Spacefire Abyssal Mountain in the Cold Province, Hanzhou. Wu Shan took out a jade slip from his sleeve and handed it over, saying, This is the list of people who have recently entered the mine. I plan to take them all down, leaving no one behind. In the past 10 years or so, around tens of thousands had entered the Spacefire Abyssal Mountain, with Emperor-level individuals numbering 1,242. The rest were mostly Dao Lords. Vice Hall Master Zhong had ruthless means and a cruel heart. However, due to Jian Wushuang directly exterminating all these people brought some concerns. It wasn't because of a soft heart but rather the honor of the Law Enforcement Hall. Unlike Wu Shan, Vice Hall Master Zhong would never tarnish the reputation of the Enforcement Hall. How could they justify killing all these people? They couldn't publicly announce it. It would be better to mistakenly kill 10,000 than let one go. By then, some with ulterior motives might follow suit, and their enforcement hall would be no different from the demonic path. Let's observe in secret first. Vice Hall Master Zhong stood up and walked straight out, saying as he walked, Don't underestimate Jian Wushuang. His physical body is unique. He might have changed his identity again. Wu Shan, sitting in the main seat, was momentarily stunned and exclaimed, Isn't that too eerie? Within the mining area, the universe origin source monitors everything. Can he shield himself from that? Nothing is impossible. Don't forget, he's only a Dao Lord. Leaving these words behind, Vice Hall Master Zhong left Mirror Light City with his entourage. He didn't have the leisurely mindset of Wuxian. Since they couldn't find him, they decided to kill two birds with one stone and first control Nieyuan. Upon receiving news of the fall of Taisan and learning that Jian Wushuang had fled with Gong Miaoyi, the Changfeng sword god speculated that Jian Wushuang would definitely go to the mining area to rescue Gong Miaoyi's father. He immediately informed Vice Hall Master Zhong. However, this matter fell under the jurisdiction of the enforcement hall, and even if he were the palace master, he couldn't intervene. His younger brother was killed, and his Dao companion was taken away. This was an irreconcilable enmity. Not personally coming to kill was already quite restrained. In the mine, Vice Hall Master Zhong's guess was spot on. Jian Wushuang was indeed considering adopting a new identity. City Lord Feng seemed like a suitable candidate. He elicited a lot of information from the City Lord Feng and now only lacked an opportunity to instantly eliminate him. This place had powerful rule forces, making it difficult for Jian Wushuang to act rashly. A decade passed in the blink of an eye, and a few individuals started to return, preparing to go back and recuperate. The consecutive mining had taken its toll. City Lord Feng had a good harvest this time, with dozens of pounds of gains. Not only did he complete the mission objective, but he also earned some merit points. Now, Jian Wushuang could be considered to have joined forces with him, naturally leaving together. At the same time, he communicated with Gong Miaoyi, asking her to come along. At this moment, one couldn't afford to recklessly seek Nieyuan as a father, or everything would be ruined if discovered by the enforcement hall. Returning to the Dragon Image Dao arena, Gong Miaoyi was waiting there. City Lord Feng, let me introduce you. This is my Dao companion, White Aura. Jian Wushuang walked ahead, pulled Gong Miaoyi over, and introduced her to City Lord Feng. City Lord Feng revealed a smile and praised, "Well, not bad. No wonder the two of you have made a name for yourselves in the Northwest. Your strength is almost reaching the peak level Tier 4. Keep up the good work." They expressed gratitude and then followed City Lord Feng to deliver the Space Fire Abyssal Stones. The place for delivering the stones was a small black hole. You just needed to throw the Mind Space Fire Abyssal Stones in, and the quantity would appear on your own token. This black hole was one way. You could throw things in but couldn't take them out. No one knew where the black hole led to. Only some emperors who couldn't bear it would jump in, and the next day, their bodies would be hanging next to the dragon image. Jian Wushuang, who had originally planned to pay attention to the Space Fire Abyssal Stones, gave up. It was simply impossible. His little trick was not enough. He had thought too simplistically. This wasn't the treasure vault of the Shenyuan family. It was one of the crucial places among the 4 great secret realms. How could it be so easy to infiltrate? After delivering all the Space Fire Abyssal Stones, the group dispersed, agreed on the next mining time, and returned to their respective secret rooms. Here, one was relatively free. You could choose not to mine, but not mining also meant you could never leave. Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoyi entered the same secret room and then set up a barrier. But this was not enough. Jian Wushuang's thought power infiltrated Gong Miaoyi's origin source. The two sat facing each other in the origin source and began discussing the information they had gathered. "I saw my father." Gong Miaoyi's face was somewhat pale, and when she uttered these words, there was no trace of excitement. Instead, her mood was quite low. Jian Wushuang didn't inquire about Nieyuan's situation but showed concern. "What happened?" He held her hand and his gaze was tender. "Those bastards. They actually made things difficult for my father in every possible way." Gong Miaoyi's eyes instantly turned red. When she saw Nieyuan, her heart was filled with bitterness. For Nieyuan to get out, the amount of ore he needed to mine was astronomical, impossible to complete within several epochs. Even so, there were still some people intentionally making things difficult for Nieyuan. According to common sense, Nieyuan was already a Tier 5 peak-level emperor, and very few dared to attract his attention. Apart from the emperors mining the ore, the rest were those who supervised. Since Jian Wushuang entered, he had only seen a few supervisors from a distance, all of whom were Tier 4 emperors. However, they had special soul rings that were linked to some notoriously evil emperors, allowing them to control them at any time. For cultivators like the black and white auras who actively entered, they wouldn't be fitted with soul rings. However, those who were captured were not so lucky. Not only would they be balanced with soul rings, but they would also be forcibly made to mine the ore. Even so, as long as they obediently mined, the supervisors generally wouldn't arbitrarily suppress them. It seemed that someone was acting behind the scenes, deliberately making things difficult for Nieyuan. Jian Wushuang patted Gong Miaoi's shoulder and comforted her. "Don't worry. It won't be long before we can leave together." That's what he said, but deep down, he didn't actually have much confidence. Xinling had yet to contact him, and he didn't know whether he simply didn't care about him or didn't trust him. His power underwent a qualitative change, having formed the power of life. This power, the giant egg knew about it. If Xinling was connected to the giant egg, he would undoubtedly be aware of the life power's special characteristics. He was now fully capable of helping Fuego restore his peak. It was a tremendous temptation, a chance that only came once. Once he successfully merged with the Tao, he could quickly step into the ranks of the Supreme Peak. Catching him then would be much more difficult. Jian Wushuang sighed in his heart. Is Xinling still not at ease? His journey had indeed been somewhat smooth. If he had known, he would have deliberately fought a bloody battle with Deputy Hall Master Zhong and others. However, in that situation, a small mistake would have spelled his doom. If caught again, he would be sent back to the Elder Palace. Xinling wouldn't have the strength to save him. When he was suppressed by the law enforcement hall before, it was just a minor incident. This time, if he were captured, it wouldn't be a minor incident. Even if it were acting, he would likely be sent to some temporal prison. Otherwise, Xinling would surely be suspicious. If that happened, the plan would fail. He didn't know what Xinling was doing now. But the law enforcement hall had already started taking action in the mines. Just now, Wu's was sent a message that Wu Shan had submitted the list of personnel entering the mine for almost a decade, requesting to kill all these people. Wu's meaning was to let him change his identity. These people had to be killed. Can't have both the child and the wolf. At that time, a fabricated charge would be arranged, and they would be secretly executed. It wouldn't be announced directly to the public, but a hint would be leaked to let Xinling know. After all this was a show set up for Xinling's attention. After comforting Gong Miaoi, Jian Wushuang revealed his plan to change his identity. The target was the people of City Lord Feng. Gong Miaoi had no objections. As long as it could save her father, anything was acceptable. Afterward, Jian Wushuang left Gong Miaoi's secret room. Back in his own secret room, Jian Wushuang began discussing Nieyuan's matters with Wu Zhuo. He wanted to find a breakthrough point from the other party. Killing a group of emperors and Tao lords who had just arrived at the mine seemed like a small chip in this game. Nieyuan was a valuable chip, but Jian Wushuang emphasized one point: preserve the other's life. No need to kill the donkey after grinding the mill. Although his interaction with Gong Miaoi was just a play, he didn't want to exploit her fully and cause the death of her father. This matter was too unethical. Even if he didn't value the aura of becoming an emperor, he still had his reputation to consider. He had his limits. However, he didn't know that Gong Miaoi, in order to save her father, had already lost her bottom line, and his so-called line of surveillance became quite ridiculous. After Jian Wushuang left, a ghostly face appeared in Gong Miaoi's bloodfall crystal. That was her top-grade eternal treasure. Even Tai San was envious when he first saw it. Top-grade eternal treasures were rare. Not even many Tier 6 emperors had them. Most were in the hands of Supreme Peaks. Even though Tai San held a high position and had a considerable net worth, he didn't possess a top-grade eternal treasure. The set of high-grade eternal treasures he used was far from being a top-grade eternal treasure. Top-grade eternal treasures were treasures that could hardly be encountered and sought after. Most of the top-grade eternal treasures in the 4 great secret realms had owners. In the hands of Tier 6 emperors, the number didn't exceed 1 hand. The rest were in the possession of Supreme Peaks. Of course, there were still quite a few eternal treasures in the Qishan Temple, but they were mostly within the Vermilion Bird Temple and generally not brought out. It was impossible to buy them, especially for the elders of the Elder Palace. Those top-grade eternal treasures were reserved for inheritors. The inheritor had to exert tremendous effort to obtain it. Gong Miaoi's ability to acquire this extraordinary eternal treasure in the first place could be attributed to her exceptionally good luck. However, within this stroke of luck, it was also Xiangling's arrangement, and now it proved to be useful. The countenance of the ghostly visage was hideous. If Jian Wushuang were to see it, he would easily discern that the owner of that face was Xianling. He. Gong Miaoi respectfully knelt and bowed. Silly girl, you've been deceived. You are nothing more than a pawn in Jian Wushuang's and Wu's hands. Do you really think Jian Wushuang would help you? Xianling began incessantly manipulating. In reality, it was the truth, and evidence was even presented. The rules of this place cannot affect me. Let me show you how your infatuated lover talks to Wuxia. The ghostly face trembled for a moment and then transformed into a celestial scene. In the starry expanse, there were two consciousnesses, precisely the scene where Jian Wushuang had just conversed with Wuxia. Although one couldn't hear what they were talking about, it was sufficient to demonstrate that everything was an illusion. Imprisonment, forced marriage, escape. All were false. Gong Miaoi's eye twitched, and her lips turned pale. Since she had escaped from the Elder Palace with Jian Wushuang, this ghostly face had been following her, constantly trying to manipulate her. But she had never believed it. However, this time, when the other party appeared, she had initially intended to plead for the salvation of her father. Instead, she witnessed the current scene. It's fake, Gong Miaoi muttered. This blow was somewhat traumatic for her. Originally, she was almost completely trusting Jian Wushuang. Still, now that she knew his true thoughts, she couldn't decide whether to feel sorrow or joy. The feeling was indescribable, a mix of sorrow and joy. If only she had seen through Jian Wushuang's ambitious schemes earlier, it would have been a joyous occasion. But sadly, her heart had already been swayed. She had even fantasized about rescuing her father and living together as a family of three. All of it now turned to mere bubbles. Gong Miaoi prostrated on the ground, hesitated for a moment, and then respectfully said, "Please, Senior, help me save my father. I am willing to do anything." "Good. As long as you agree, those who have troubled your father will immediately disappear." Xianling was overjoyed. Finally, there was a return on the investment in Gong Miaoi. Through all the guidance, she had now been completely secured. He valued Jian Wushuang indeed, especially after Jian Wushuang discovered that giant egg and began planning how to capture him. Unexpectedly, this time, Jian Wushuang was delivered to him on a silver platter. "Trying to plot against me?" Xianling revealed a cold smile. "You're far from capable." After all, he was Xianling, a god with limitless powers. Although trapped in the first prison, his influence had always been present in the four great secret realms. "Little girl, you just need to place these 6 soul flags in the designated locations. Once I catch Jian Wushuang, I will teleport you and Nye Yuan to a safe realm where someone will protect you both." Xianling spoke earnestly, and Gong Miaoi had no other choice. She didn't want to wait any longer, and who knew if Jian Wushuang had ever considered saving her father. Everything was a chess piece. Perhaps, once utilized, she would be discarded. After putting away the 6 soul flags, Gong Miaoi's grimace disappeared. Before disappearing, Xianling reminded her, "Remember, don't trust anything Jian Wushuang says. He is a complete and thorough liar." Others may not know, but Xianling were well aware of the sordid deeds Jian Wushuang had once committed. On the other side, just after Jian Wushuang finished communicating with Wuxia, he sneezed abruptly. He had a strange sensation that something was wrong, and his mind was somewhat unsettled. "Could it be that Xianling have noticed me?" Jian Wushuang muttered to himself, and it was indeed a possibility. He had already instructed Wuxia to find a way to contact Nye Yuan and persuade him to cooperate with them. Now, there was only this method left. Killing was not an option. He could only win him over. In a corner of the mine, for some unknown reason, the guards around Nye Yuan suddenly dispersed, no longer causing trouble for him. Nye Yuan was puzzled by this, but he didn't think too much about it. His determination was firm. He must get out of here and head to the Grave God Mountain to reverse time and revive his Tao companion. But at this moment, a consciousness entered his body. Nye Yuan. The voice was familiar to Jian Wushuang. It was Wu Zhuo personally transmitting his message. Only 3 people were currently aware of this matter, and Nye Yuan became the 4th. The first 3 were Jinling, Wu Zhuo, and Jian Wushuang. If these 3 joined forces, the entire Qixin Temple would be in danger of destruction. For Nye Yuan, a Tier 5 emperor, to know such top-secret information, especially regarding the safety of the Qixin Temple, was already quite fortunate. If this plan succeeded, reviving his Tao companion would be a minor matter. After all, it was only reviving one person. Even those emperors who fell in the 4 great secret realms could be resurrected. Unless their mental consciousness collapsed, they could be revived. Zhenling possessed this ability. Reviving a Tier 4 emperor was a piece of cake. Gong Miaoi's mother was just a Tier 4 peak-level emperor, and it wouldn't consume much power from the origin source C. When Nye Yuan heard the voice in his mind, he was stunned. He initially thought it was an auditory illusion, and in his astonishment, he considered it a hallucination caused by the fragility of his mental and spiritual strength. A sign of impending death. He had many unfinished tasks and dared not face death. Moreover, since his birth, there hadn't been a single era, so how could there be signs of weakness in his mental consciousness? Don't be surprised. I come from the Elder Palace. My name is Wu Zhuo. Upon hearing that it was someone from the Elder Palace, Nye Yuan felt a mixture of astonishment and anger. He had been harmed by individuals from the Elder Palace, and now his disciple had been taken away. He harbored deep-seated hatred for the Elder Palace, especially the Law Enforcement Hall. Wu Zhuo. Nye Yuan had not yet responded when he recalled this familiar yet terrifying name. Wu Zhuo. This name resonated loudly in the Northern Territory, or rather, in the entire Heavenly Realm. If the 2 Vice Hall Masters of the Law Enforcement Hall were executioners, then Wu Zhuo was the king who judged all living beings. Leaving aside how terrifying the other party was, the more pressing question was why Wu Zhuo sought him out. This was a profound issue. However, Wu Zhuo didn't give Nye Yuan a chance to speak. For him, Nye Yuan was just a small figure. If Jian Wushuang wanted to protect him, Wu Zhuo wouldn't bother explaining anything to a native emperor. Listen carefully to every word I say next. Don't ask questions and don't harbor any doubts. Just follow my instructions. Wu Zhuo's tone was domineering. Nye Yuan didn't buy into this, retorting immediately, "Humph! Even if you're Wu Zhuo, the hall master of the Elder Palace, it doesn't matter. Without distinguishing right from wrong, you're no different from the demonic path. Don't say anything more. I won't agree to anything." With these words spoken, it was Wu Zhuo's turn to be astonished. When had a native emperor dared to speak to him like this? Did they not fear him? He was Wu Zhuo, the hall master of the enforcement hall, a former disciple of Qixin, a peak existence among the supreme peak, and none of the 3 palace masters were his match. If it weren't for the fact that the Elder Palace was the personal force of Jinling, he would have already taken turns beating the 3 palace masters. They were nothing more than slaves plundered and brought to build the Qixin Temple. How could they be qualified to sit on an equal footing with him? Not to mention that he still didn't have the qualification to sit on an equal footing now, which was the most detestable part. In the past, with his temperament, he wouldn't even deign to enter the Elder Palace. But now, because of the appearance of Jinling, he had also been deprived of his identity as Qixin's disciple. Otherwise, he wouldn't have colluded with those people from the Elder Palace. Now, he was actually scolded by a native emperor, and he didn't even know how to respond. This was the most aggrieving. If it weren't for the sake of Jian Wushuang's face, he would have crushed Nye Yuan long ago. For the greater plan, for the bigger picture, he could only endure. Nye Yuan listened carefully. The things to come are related to your daughter. Wu Zhuo's voice became heavy. Then, he slightly concealed part of the plan and told Nye Yuan. He particularly mentioned the matter concerning Gong Miaoi. Nye Yuan was completely stunned. His daughter was still alive? And right in this mine. Daughter. In his originally desolate heart, a hint of warmth emerged. His daughter was still alive, but her mother had fallen. However, Wuxia also promised him that as long as he cooperated, not only could they leave here, but they could also go directly to the Grave God Mountain to resurrect his Tao companion. In the past, the chances of hope seemed remote, but now they were within reach. Nie Yuan, how could he let go of such an opportunity? He immediately agreed. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, along with City Lord Feng and others, headed towards the place where the ore was originally mined. This time, let's still set a period of 10 years. Every 10 years we take a break. It won't take much time, and then we'll be free. City Lord Feng said with a light laugh, and everyone was very enthusiastic. Jian Wushuang blended in and also showed a longing expression. However, Gong Miaoi had a trace of unease. When she looked at Jian Wushuang, her eyes changed. But at this moment, Jian Wushuang's thoughts were not on Gong Miaoi, and he didn't notice. Upon reaching the mine, the group began to silently extract the ore. Gong Miaoi found a secluded corner and worked alone. Using the diving mining equipment, it took only a month to carve out a small hole in the stone wall. Gong Miaoi buried the soul flag in it. However, in this mine, there was only one location designated by Xinling. The remaining positions needed to be found elsewhere. To avoid arousing suspicion from outsiders, Gong Miaoi transmitted to Jian Wushuang, "I'll go check other places. You don't need to worry about me." Jian Wushuang knew her thoughts. She must be uneasy about Nie Yuan. But he didn't suspect anything. He just nodded and reminded her to be careful. But Gong Miaoi felt disdain in her heart. Now Jian Wushuang's concern seemed disgusting to her. There was no genuine affection. Everything was calculated, filled with righteousness and moral principles in his words, but harboring a cunning mind. Jian Wushuang received a message from Wuxia after Gong Miaoi's departure. Everything had been arranged on Nie Yuan's end. The grand drama of father-daughter reunion was about to unfold. However, beforehand, Wuxia had already set up a large array through Nie Yuan, ensuring that the enforcers from the enforcement hall wouldn't easily capture them. In the upcoming confrontation, they hoped that Xinling would intervene. Otherwise, their plan would be in jeopardy. They had only 15 minutes. The surveillance here consisted of only 3 Tier 6 emperors. All were native emperors with mediocre strength, and Jian Wushuang alone could handle them. As long as there was a Tier 6 peak emperor from the outside, especially one from the Elder Palace, that emperor would arrive within 3 breaths. As for the avatars of the 3 temple masters, the one presiding over this area was Temple Master Lu Hua. Although Jian Wushuang was now officially wanted, he wouldn't go all out. There would certainly be some delay before Lu Hua arrived. Moreover, since the enforcement hall was handling this matter, as long as it didn't threaten the mines, they shouldn't take action. It was the enforcers from the enforcement hall who would arrive within 15 minutes. Everything depended on this 15-minute window. If Xinling were truly unprepared, they could only accept their fate, wasting their efforts when the time came. While Jian Wushuang mined the rocks on one side, his true self projected out, using a strand of telepathic force to locate Nie Yuan. The great battle was about to erupt. Nie Yuan was currently searching for Gong Miaoi. Buzz. It was a subtle transformation of the soul. Another soul flag embedded into the mountain. Only the last one remains. Gong Miaoi held her breath, not daring to pause. Even she did not hesitate to use the Tier 5 peak-level origin source, forcibly excavating, instantly creating a small opening. Then she placed the flag inside. Another location. Gong Miaoi followed the guidance, searching. However, she was unaware that a strand of consciousness passed by her. At this moment, Gong Miaoi, disregarding everything, appeared quite flustered. Within the consciousness, Jian Wushuang's true self observed Gong Miaoi, a hint of unease in his heart. Although he didn't know what had happened, a sense of foreboding lingered in his heart. Never mind, it's best if Xinling comes. Even if Xinling doesn't come, she can't stir up much trouble. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. This time he had been careless. The current situation deviated from the plan. Gong Miaoi's strange actions were definitely related to certain individuals. Could be the law enforcement hall, perhaps Xinling, hard to say. Jian Wushuang manipulated his consciousness, continuing forward. He needed to find Nieyuan, take the other party to meet Gong Miaoi. This time he was throwing caution to the wind. Here, sooner or later, the people from the law enforcement hall would discover them. Moreover, not rescuing Nieyuan immediately would raise Xinling's suspicion. However, he was unaware that this seemingly flawless plan was actually within the grasp of Xinling. In the void, amidst silent darkness, crack, a startling thunderbolt flashed, illuminating the dark crevice. In the blink of an eye, this place silently gathered tens of thousands of people. All of them were emperors, and they were powerful emperors. All of them were Tier 5 emperors. Thousands of Tier 5 emperors gathered, and only the Elder Palace and the White Tiger Temple had such a grand scale. These individuals were the powerful beings arranged by Xinling in this place. Now, they waited for Gong Miaoi to set up the formation before launching an attack on the mine. If they flew in slowly from the periphery, it was likely that even before reaching the mine, they would attract the top powerhouses of the Elder Palace, who would wipe them out in one fell swoop. This time, Xinling had gathered all the members of the Heavenly Realm's Shadow Sect, and there were even 5 Supreme Peak experts. There were dozens of Tier 6 peak-level emperors, and there were hundreds of emperors with the top-level Tier 6 strength. This force, apart from the Divine Temple and the Elder Palace, could sweep through any place, including the mine. Even if Land Hua personally intervened with his true body, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. As a flash of lightning crossed, the faces of these people turned pale. They had just undergone a special inheritance. Soul Dao secret technique. Soul transmigration. Hum. An ancient humming sound echoed. As if receiving a command, these individuals voluntarily separated their physical bodies and divine bodies. Depart. Capture Jian Wushuang, and kill all the others, leaving none alive. Yes. The mine. Jian Wushuang circled around for a while and finally saw Nieyuan. Without further disguise, he directly transformed back into his original appearance. Nieyuan. Upon hearing his name, Nieyuan paused for a moment. The voice calling his name sounded familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. He turned around to look. Jian Wushuang. When he saw Jian Wushuang, he was somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that the inheritor mentioned by Wu Zuo was none other than Jian Wushuang, with whom he had some acquaintance. Initially, Jian Wushuang was just a Dao Lord with strength comparable to a peak-level Tier 2 Emperor at most. Now, judging by the aura, he was even more powerful than Nieyuan. Inheritors were indeed extraordinary. Nieyuan was shocked in his heart. Follow me. Jian Wushuang didn't waste any words. Since he had directly revealed his true self, it was likely that he would be discovered soon. The people guarding this place had not noticed them yet. He still had a chance to catch his breath. Nieyuan followed him, and the two of them didn't hold back at all, advancing at full speed. Their figures were like flashes of lightning. Those who passed by couldn't help but look at them more. Where is my daughter? Nieyuan couldn't help but feel excited. Without looking back, Jian Wushuang whispered, "Her location is a bit off, but you'll see her soon. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Her name is Gong Miaoi." Gong Miaoi Miaoi. Nieyuan's eyes turned red. He was about to see his daughter soon. As the two advanced towards the location of Gong Miaoi, a tremendous soul force quietly descended. This force was familiar to Jian Wushuang. It was the soul pathway inheritance of the three kings. Back then, he had ascended the soul steps, so he was quite acquainted with this aura. However, why did this aura appear here? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. Wasn't this aura supposed to fall into the temporal turbulence along with the three kings' court? Why did it appear here? It was very strange. Swish, swish, swish. Powerful souls began to descend, and the soul power was so strong that it reached its peak. Both Jian Wushuang and Nieyuan came to a halt, because in front of them, a powerful soul had emerged. In their presence, the soul with a beast's head began to undergo a transformation. Divine power appeared on its illusory soul, and that power was the force of the space fire abyssal stone. These souls were actually absorbing the power of the space fire abyssal mountain to replenish their divine bodies and physical forms. Jian Wushuang was greatly astonished. Then, in a state of confusion, he transmitted his voice to Wu Zhuo. "It's Shen Ling, he's taking action," Wu Zhuo exclaimed excitedly. However, Jian Wushuang wasn't as excited, because that soul seemed to have set its sights on him. It looked like it was about to take action against him. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang unsheathed the Jueyun sword. Later, a hand was placed on Nie Yuan's body, and a majestic force of life was injected into Nie Yuan's body, instantly restoring him to his peak state. Jian Wushuang reminded, "Hold on to these things. You'll need them later." Then he took out a mustard seed and handed it to Nie Yuan. Inside were some treasures, a complete set of eternal treasures. He was afraid that Nie Yuan might fall, and these treasures could also serve as a defense. These soul bodies were not simple, and the enforcers from the enforcement hall would also take action. By then, the situation would be chaotic. If one wasn't careful, even a Tier 6 emperor might fall, let alone Nie Yuan, a Tier 5 peak-level emperor. "Let's go find Miaoyi first," Nie Yuan said urgently after seeing the changes. He was worried about the safety of Gong Miaoyi. According to Wu Zhuo, there would be a major battle here. Since he had found his daughter, he wouldn't let her suffer any harm again. He hadn't protected her mother well in the past, but today he would ensure the safety of his daughter at all costs. Jian Wushuang nodded and prepared to continue forward, but the soul body that had not yet fully recovered its strength blocked their way. "I found Jian Wushuang. After restoring my strength, quickly." The other party's words were cut off by Jian Wushuang's sword, breaking through the soul body. These soul bodies were very fragile. Judging by the strength of the soul, the other party was at least a Tier 6 emperor level. However, they couldn't even block Jian Wushuang's sword strike, displaying at most the strength of a Tier 5 emperor, and with no defense at all. "Go!" Jian Wushuang, accompanied by Nie Yuan, swiftly departed, rushing towards the direction of Gong Miaoyi. The methods of Shen Ling were too mysterious. These soul bodies instantly descended, surprising not only Jian Wushuang but even Wu Zhuo. However, this played right into their hands. The enforcers of the enforcement hall were originally prepared to search for Jian Wushuang but encountered the experts from the Shadow Sect, conveniently diverting their attention. The strongest figure presiding over this place, Emperor Lu Hua of the Elder Palace, had already descended in an instant, and the formation of the space fire abyssal stone began to take effect. If it were just for Jian Wushuang, it wouldn't be necessary to go to such lengths. But the current situation had surpassed their expectations. Those soul bodies, in less than 3 breaths, had fully recovered to their peak state, and over 15,000 emperor-level powerhouses were now rampaging freely. They also had their own assignments. One Supreme Peak expert took on the challenge against Lu Hua, while another Supreme Peak went to set up a certain formation, securing the retreat. The final Supreme Peak expert's target was Jian Wushuang. "Found him, follow me," the Supreme Peak expert commanded, instantly gathering several Tier 6 emperors. The guards inside the mine were simply inadequate. With only 3 Tier 6 emperors, they could only defend passively. They never expected that one day someone would dare to attack the mine, and that too with so many powerful assailants appearing instantly. The external guards and reinforcements from the enforcement hall were still on their way, needing some time to reach this location. Lu Hua, in his avatar, was still being held back by the Supreme Peak expert and couldn't intervene. "You traitors and rebels!" Emperor Lu Hua roared. The once extremely sturdy mine was now beginning to collapse. His avatar wouldn't last much longer, and at this moment, his main body was in the headquarters of the Yuanyang Elder Palace, gathering forces. At the Yuanyang Lake, the headquarters of the Elder Palace, there were not only elders but also a large number of inheritors and top-level experts among the indigenous emperors. They all received orders, turning what seemed like a mission for the inheritors. In just a moment, 100,000 troops were assembled. However, transporting such a large number of people at once was obviously impossible. It had to be done in batches. This required time. Emperor Lu Hua could only first teleport his true self to stabilize the situation. Buzz! In an instant, the battle escalated to the highest level. Emperor Lu Hua personally took action, causing the entire mining mountain to tremble. However, one person couldn't contend with 4 hands. Tens of thousands of emperor-level experts had already thrown the entire mining mountain into chaos. Jian Wushuang, accompanied by Nie Yuan, struggled to find the whereabouts of Gong Miaoyi in the chaotic battlefield. Powerful individuals kept pouring in from the outside, making the battle even more chaotic. The powerhouses from Xunling's faction basically killed anyone on sight without hesitation. Now both sides were searching for Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang and Nie Yuan also had a difficult time navigating through. Fortunately, most were Tier 5 emperors, making them easier to deal with. Don't engage with them. Find Miaoyi first. Nie Yuan roared, unleashing a combat power comparable to a Tier 6 emperor. His sword Dao differed from Jian Wushuang's ultimate sword Dao. With a single slash, it seemed as if the opponent couldn't resist or perhaps didn't know how to resist. For those Tier 5 emperors, once touched by Nie Yuan's sword shadows, their bodies began to contort, transforming into mere paper from 3-dimensional figures, becoming thin sheets. Jian Wushuang's eyes gleamed, and the power of the sword Dao resembled the ultimate Dao contained within Gong Miaoyi. Or one could say it was a condensed form of Nie Yuan's sword Dao. This time, he didn't come in vain. After overcoming this crisis, he was determined to thoroughly study Nie Yuan's origin source, which would greatly aid his ultimate sword Dao. Jian Wushuang casually killed several Tier 5 emperors blocking their way, pulling Nie Yuan along, and breaking away from the core. They twisted and turned, entering narrow passages. Here, some emperors gathered to mine stones. These individuals were weak, mostly Tier 4 emperors. Going out meant a dead end. As long as a Tier 5 emperor appeared, they could be swept away. Thus, they dared not leave this place. Sensing Gong Miaoyi's aura nearby, without any hesitation, Jian Wushuang, with Nie Yuan in tow, charged forward. At this moment, a peculiar emperor, clinging to the stone wall, opened his eyes and hoarsely exclaimed, "Jian Wushuang is with me. Hurry! Bring people." The reason these individuals had come to this place was for Jian Wushuang. Killing these people was merely a ploy to create chaos. Upon receiving the message, everyone gathered towards the source, and soon, 5 Tier 6 emperors had descended. Jian Wushuang, Gong Miaoyi. The 3 had just converged and found themselves besieged within the mining cave. Fortunately, there was only one exit, allowing passage for a single person. They were merely blocked, nothing more. Nie Yuan stared at Gong Miaoyi, gazing foolishly. The myriad of words he had prepared in his heart was on the tip of his tongue, yet he hesitated on how to articulate them. It wasn't until Gong Miaoyi spoke first, gently saying, "Father!" Father and daughter embraced. Everything was understood without words. Jian Wushuang glanced over, tactfully blocking the gap and temporarily halting the opponent's advance. At the same time, he communicated with Wuxia. "Has Fuego appeared yet?" Relying solely on these people, capturing him would be easy. However, this was a mine. It housed numerous powerful beings, and elders from the Elder Palace were rushing in large numbers. Even if they captured him, it would be challenging to escape unscathed. Wuxia was also anxious, replying through mental communication, "Not yet." Their target was Fuego, not these ordinary emperors. Even if they captured the 3 Supreme Peak beings, it would not significantly impact them. "Jian Wushuang, how about you pretend to surrender first? Leave with these people. I don't think Fuego intends to come. We might as well take a step further. Maybe by then we'll be able to see Fuego. Rest assured, as long as Fuego appears, Xunling will personally intervene. By then, no one will be able to threaten you." Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow. Wasn't this just nonsense? If he advanced any further, it would truly be an irreversible calamity. Moreover, he couldn't entirely trust Xunling. If Xunling had such great abilities, how could they fail to locate a crippled universe master in their own lair? But now, he was caught in a dilemma and had no other option but to follow Wu's instructions. "Brother Wuxia, don't play jokes on me at this critical moment. If I go with them and Xunling doesn't show up, You'll be fully responsible for everything, Jian Wushuang bluntly stated, putting pressure on Wuxia. It was also for his own consideration. Wuxia gritted his teeth and reluctantly agreed. This time, both of them not only staked their futures but also their lives. Jian Wushuang would be fine, Xinling had caught him, and at most they would utilize him without posing a threat to his life. Wuxia, on the other hand, was different. If the plan failed, Xinling wouldn't spare him. Perhaps he would end up suffering in the second prison. Boom! While conversing with Wuxia, a formidable force pierced through Jian Wushuang's chest. The force penetrated his divine body, shattering the 50,000-fold divine body. The origin source trembled. The opponent's strength was undoubtedly the pinnacle among the Tier 6 emperors, probably not inferior to the Lord of the Turtle Spirit Island in the Earth Realm. This time, Jian Wushuang didn't destroy his origin source. With just one strike, he was sent flying and crashed into the stone wall. Nie Yuan, now understanding that it wasn't the time for father-daughter sentiments, promptly stood in front of Gong Miaoyi. This made Jian Wushuang feel awkward. Despite the hidden conspiracy behind him, at least on the surface, he was saving this father-daughter duo. Couldn't they give him some face? Even if he was outmatched, he could at least make a show of it. Everyone, I'll go with you? Jian Wushuang struggled to free himself from the stone wall, his body incredibly weak from the severe injuries he had sustained. At the entrance of the cave, a figure cloaked in blood red emerged, bathed in flames. The aura emanating from the figure was terrifying. This person was at the supreme peak. Jian Wushuang's eye sockets contracted. Originally, he thought it was a Tier 6 emperor, but unexpectedly it was a supreme peak powerhouse. It seemed that this supreme peak expert was afraid of killing him with a single blow, so he suppressed his strength when attacking. All personnel gather at the designated location. I have captured Jian Wushuang. Phew! Jian Wushuang covered his chest, breathing heavily. Then he turned to look at Gong Miaoyi and Nie Yuan, saying, "Surrender. We are not opponents." Nie Yuan had no objections to this, as he knew the plan. But Gong Miaoyi was different. At this moment, she took the initiative to step forward, respectfully kneeling and speaking firmly. Junior Gong Miaoyi, Lord Xinling had promised. Before she could finish speaking, the Supreme Peak expert instantly made a move. A flame rushed to Gong Miaoyi's side in an instant, and the power of that flame was enough to incinerate heaven and earth. Extremely terrifying. Even the space fire abyssal stone was melting. Nie Yuan reacted quickly, instantly standing in front of Gong Miaoyi, blocking the flames. When Gong Miaoyi stepped forward just now, he was very surprised. This matter was becoming more and more complicated. Jian Wushuang's face also darkened. Originally, he was unwilling to believe it, but now the fact was in front of him and he had to believe it. Gong Miaoyi had betrayed them. Although they were using each other, he genuinely wanted to save Nie Yuan. Even if he was captured, he would plead for the other two to be spared. By then, even if they were taken away by the Elder Palace, Wuxia, who knew the plan, would not trouble the father and daughter. Why'd it have to be like this? Jian Wushuang watched coldly, not uttering a word. He understood Xinling too well. Once Gong Miaoyi was used, she wouldn't be left alive. Even Bai Junwang, who had regained his peak, died just like that. Not to mention someone like Gong Miaoyi, capturing her meant she had no further utility. Immersed in flames, the Supreme Peak expert showed no expression, coldly stating, "Lord Xinling did not instruct me to take you away, so you must die." Xinling only informed them to take Jian Wushuang, kill anyone else they saw, and eliminate Gong Miaoyi. It was a calamity that could not be left behind. If Jian Wushuang had truly developed emotions for Gong Miaoyi, perhaps she might have been kept alive. In that case, she could be kept alive to threaten Jian Wushuang later. However, Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoyi were mutually exploiting each other. Therefore, there was no need to keep her alive. The Supreme Peak expert acted directly, without any hesitation. A snake of fire, like lightning, moved at an incredibly fast speed. Both Gong Miaoyi and Nie Yuan were Tier 5 emperors. Even if they could unleash the power of a Tier 6 emperor, they couldn't resist. Jian Wushuang, standing aside, still felt some reluctance. He threw out a sword, directly intercepting the fire snake. "Give her a way out," Jian Wushuang said. "This has nothing to do with her." "I'll go with you." The Supreme Peak expert was surprised. Clearly, Gong Miaoi had betrayed Jian Wushuang, yet he was pleading for her. She must die. If the Xinling hadn't commanded, he might have given Jian Wushuang some face. However, Xinling explicitly stated to kill Gong Miaoi, and he would absolutely not hold back. The opponent remained resolute, and Jian Wushuang looked towards Gong Miaoi, saying indifferently, "It's the time and fate." However, Gong Miaoi was utterly frenzied. Her eyes glared at Jian Wushuang, and she angrily exclaimed, "Jian Wushuang, stop pretending to be a good person here. You are a complete demon. Be careful with your schemes. You'll never become emperor in your entire life." These words were a venomous outcry from the depths of her heart. Never able to become emperor. Jian Wushuang's expression also darkened. His longing for the position of emperor, his aspirations for the future great Tao, enduring a curse that he'd never become emperor for a lifetime. Anyone else would have died 1,000 deaths long ago. Suppressing his rage with all his might, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes. Perish! This time no one intervened. The serpent of fire, without obstruction, instantly incinerated Nie Yuan's body through and through, leaving only his divine body and origin source. "No!" Gong Miaoi screamed heartbreakingly. They had just recognized each other. Though Nie Yuan didn't know what happened between Gong Miaoi and Jian Wushuang, he guessed that his daughter had been manipulated. This opportunity had been awaited for a long time. Perhaps he should have died long ago. Died in front of his Tao companion. Shouldn't have lingered in this place. This time, dying for the sake of his daughter was worth it. Nie Yuan turned slowly, his divine body and origin source continuously shattering. He stared calmly at Gong Miaoi and said, "Miaoi, live well. No one can harm you, no one." Buzz! A tremendous force erupted from Nie Yuan's body. The divine body and origin source, nearly incinerated, recovered once more. The divine body also turned golden, and the entire person transformed into a Tao image. The tenderness vanished from his eyes, replaced by an imposing aura overlooking the heavens and earth. "I, Nie Yuan of the Starry Sky lineage, use the sword Tao of my lineage. Today, I seek a solution through my sword. I ask Senior to grant me a sword to break the enemy." Nie Yuan bowed with his hands clasped, and a golden light broke through the fabric of time, coming from the end of time. Buzz! This time, the entire Qixin temple trembled. Starry Sky? Jian Wushuang was greatly alarmed. Someone else actually knew about the Starry Sky? He never expected that Nie Yuan, a native emperor, could have contact with the Starry Sky. How is that possible? Moreover, he said he wanted to borrow a sword to defeat the enemy? Gong Miaoi showed no surprise, only a reluctance in her eyes. The Supreme Peak figure, however, was quite surprised. Sensing that something was amiss, he wanted to take action. But the next moment, the entire Qixin temple trembled. A golden light descended instantly. Buzz! In Nie Yuan's hands was a golden sword radiating the combination of time and space, and the sharpness in his eyes reached its peak. "Do you think that you alone can kill my daughter?" The golden Tao image shouted angrily, and with a single sword swing, the mountain instantly split into two. The enormous space fire abyssal mountain was unexpectedly cleaved in half. A massive crack appeared instantly, and a ray of light shone through. Outside it was daytime. Jian Wushuang stood stunned on the side, slowly lifting his head to look at the sky. The Supreme Peak powerhouse had quietly and silently fallen. At this moment, the flames were extinguished, and the Supreme Peak powerhouse revealed his original appearance. The astonishment in his eyes was beyond words. He had fallen. Under this one sword strike, the golden Tao image also began to collapse, turning into a stone statue. In the final glance, Nie Yuan always looked at Gong Miaoi. His eyes filled not with sharpness but warmth. In fact, there was a great deal of reluctance, but he dared not show it. He was afraid that his daughter would be saddened by his fall. "Father!" Gong Miaoi cried, tears streaming down her face. Disregarding everything, she rushed forward and desperately tried to grasp her father's origin source before it disappeared, hoping to detain her father. Now she deeply regretted it. It was her fault that her father died. If only she hadn't believed the words of Xinling, they wouldn't have sought to silence her. It was all her fault. Jian Wushuang, frozen in place, noticed that Nie Yuan's origin source had not completely disappeared. In an instant he acted, his life force erupting, instantly restoring him to his peak. Deep within his hand, the power of devouring erupted instantly, accompanied by a vast amount of life power, enveloping Nie Yuan's origin source and delaying its fragmentation. Then the power of devouring was activated, beginning to consume. He had long coveted Nie Yuan's origin source. Now that it was right in front of him, how could he let it slip away? Moreover, after witnessing the power of that sword strike, he became completely obsessed. The power of that sword strike probably exceeded the Emperor's capabilities. A sword strike that killed a Supreme Peak expert and could even split open the Spacefire Abyssal Mountain. This level of power probably reached the level of a Universe Master. Hiss! Gong Miaoi turned her head and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was unexpectedly devouring her father's origin source. Her face was full of resentment, and she wanted to confront Jian Wushuang with all her might. But she was no match for Jian Wushuang. Humph! Jian Wushuang snorted coldly. The claw of the candle dragon directly seized Gong Miaoi's neck, and he roared. If it weren't for you, Nie Yuan wouldn't have died. Do you understand? She almost ruined his grand plan. He had to obtain Nie Yuan's origin source. If Nie Yuan were alive, he would have sought to learn from him. Now that Nie Yuan had fallen, he couldn't just watch it disappear. The Starry Sky lineage. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. He wondered if he could be considered part of the Starry Sky lineage. Initially, he had thought that he was the only one to enter the Starry Sky. However, he was surprised to learn that Nie Yuan's Sword Dao origin source also came from the Starry Sky. The impact of the Starry Sky on him was significant. He mastered the extreme Dao within the Starry Sky, while Nie Yuan seemed to have grasped the Sword Dao. The Starry Sky lineage. Now, he harbored an additional uncertainty in his heart. If even the natives of the Qixin Temple had been to the Starry Sky, were there others who had visited it, and how did they do it? Hu Qing. Jian Wushuang immediately thought of one person. With just one step, Hu Qing immediately stepped onto the Dao. He had always been suspicious. Later, he accidentally learned that Hu Qing was a reincarnated being. Jian Wushuang hadn't thought much about it at the time. However, now it seemed that during his moment of enlightenment, Hu Qing might have also entered the Starry Sky, gaining formidable strength after countless cycles of reincarnation. If it were merely a step onto the Dao, his character wouldn't have changed so drastically. Even if it was due to memories from his past life, it wouldn't be so extreme. In his previous life, Hu Qing, although also on the ultimate Dao, had only average potential. In the current context, one could indeed say he had average potential. The current Hu Qing, compared to his past life and even the entire primitive universe, was a top-notch genius. In just a short time, he had already reached the level of a Tier 6 emperor, surpassing many old fellows who had practiced for countless eons, quickly catching up with Shang's pace. This heaven-defying potential might not be solely due to his past life. It could be related to the Starry Sky. Nie Yuan was similar. From Nie Yuan, one could deduce that even though he hadn't practiced for an entire epoch and was a native emperor, he had reached his current level. Without the inheritance, Nie Yuan's potential in the 4 great secret realms would undoubtedly make him a top-notch genius. At the peak level of Tier 5, comparable to the combat power of a Tier 6 emperor, born in less than an epoch. The Starry Sky. Jian Wushuang yearned for it. The Qixin Temple provided substantial assistance, but giving birth to the Starry Sky represented an aspiration for the future. That place was the cradle of the strong. In the vast expanse of the original universe and the river of time and space, there was no universe master in sight. It was simply not the place for them to enhance their strength. If it weren't for the appearance of Qixin Temple, their river of time and space, spanning billions of epochs, would hardly have reached the level of the ancient Moro temporal space. Even at the level of morotemporal space, they would likely fall due to its immense strength. The cosmos, time and space, and the starry sky. Jian Wushuang harbored a greater yearning for the starry sky, because the river of time and space left only such an impression on him. Although he had seen many rivers of time and space in the starry sky initially, some of them were formidable, serving as the lifeblood of the cosmos, but ultimately they were just lines. The starry sky was the true carrier. Compared to all this, matters like fuego, Wuxia, and plans became irrelevant. Jian Wushuang carefully absorbed Nie Yuan's origin source into his body, finally exhaling in relief. The greatest gain this time wasn't attracting the attention of Xinling but the information about the starry sky. Unfortunately, he couldn't find any information about the starry sky from Nie Yuan's origin source. Still, he could sense a strong sword intent from the origin source Dao. Unlike his ultimate sword Dao, Nie Yuan's sword Dao was more refined. Perhaps it was because Nie Yuan had also reached perfection in the sword Dao, or maybe it was because his sword Dao originated from the starry sky. Jian Wushuang believed more in the latter, that it came from the starry sky. He had confidence in his own sword Dao. Merely relying on going against the heavens couldn't compare to his sword Dao. At the pinnacle of the 8th level of the ultimate sword Dao, among all the ultimate Dao lords, none could compare to him. This was a demonstration of strength and confidence. His mastery of the ultimate sword Dao was a series of immense opportunities with each step. Now he was just one step away. As long as he reached perfection, he could perform the Dao merge. Once he became an emperor, his power could skyrocket rapidly. At that point, he could directly rival the Supreme Peak, even stepping into the realm of Supreme Peak for a short period. Regarding the pinnacle technique of the power of life, he had already perfected it preliminarily, reaching the level of minor Mahayana. After achieving perfection in the sword Dao, combining it, he could reach a greater realm, breaking through and directly challenging the profound arts. As for the path of spatial realms, it was too slow. Before becoming an emperor, reaching the realm of black holes was considered good enough. After becoming an emperor, there would be some improvement in his understanding of space, but not a significant leap in spatial realms. Relying on realms to reach the Supreme Peak was unlikely. The evolution of space into the universe was already a half step into becoming the universe master. Currently, there was only one person who had simultaneously reached the Supreme Peak in both secret techniques and realms, and that was Shang. Out of the numerous inheritors, only one had reached this level. Apart from the inheritors, Wuxia was also at this level. As for those puppet hall masters, it was unknown. Jian Wushuang left Gong Miaoyi aside, paying no attention to her. This time, her survival depended entirely on fate. He had to take the initiative now. The strong from the Elder Palace kept coming, and those arranged by Xinling were quickly defeated. Now he had to plead with these people to take him away. Since Xinling arranged it this way, there must be a way out. Outside the cave, a group of emperors surrounded Jian Wushuang, not daring to approach, because the Supreme Peak expert who had just entered had fallen, and even the space fire abyssal mountain was split in half. No one knew how powerful Jian Wushuang really was. Don't be afraid, we're on the same side. Jian Wushuang took out a token, and the emperors breathed a sigh of relief when they saw it. The token was actually fake. Originally he had a real one, but it was destroyed when he fell into the second prison. But pulling it out to deceive these people was enough. They were here for him, and even without the token, they would take him away. Jian Wushuang, you better not play tricks. The leading Tier 6 emperor cautiously watched Jian Wushuang. Obviously, these people were scared by the sword strike just now. Not only them, but everyone present was also frightened. Even Wuxia kept communicating with him, asking what had happened, and how the space fire abyssal mountain could be split in half. Zhenling in the origin source sea were staring with wide eyes, holding a string of light green beads in their hands, constantly fiddling with them. That power comes from the starry sky. Zhenling was extremely shocked. Originally, he thought that among the inheritors, someone extraordinary related to the starry sky would appear. Now it seemed that the Qixin temple was no longer safe. This strengthened his determination to run away. Once he got rid of Fuego, he would expedite the growth of the inheritor, forcibly produce a universe master, solve that true master, understand cause and effect, and then take the Qixin temple to other dimensions. In this yet-to-mature space-time, the concealed secrets were too numerous to linger. Just from the starry sky alone, 2 visitors had already appeared. Jian Wushuang was one, and Nie Yuan was another, both practitioners of the Sword Dao. This reminded him of the former Emperor Jueyun. Could there be some kind of connection between them, or was it just a coincidence that both were sword cultivators and exceptionally outstanding? Jian Wushuang and Emperor Jueyun, no need to mention them, they represented the pinnacle of Dao Lord and Emperor, respectively. As for Nie Yuan, what was his connection to the starry sky? Others, looking at Nie Yuan, might be surprised that a native emperor could be so powerful, with impressive potential. However, in the eyes of Jinling, Nie Yuan's strength and potential were only average, with only the final sword strike causing some unease. He vividly remembered that sword strike, emerging from the end of time, tearing through space-time, and descending into the Qixin temple. The Qixin temple, a temporal treasure, couldn't resist it. It was like a thatched hut. The golden light entered as it pleased, rendering him powerless to resist. The last time it happened was when he inspected Jian Wushuang's timeline, stared at by the vast eyes of the starry sky. This time, it was the golden sword summoned by Nie Yuan that brought him here. The things that could endanger him were increasing, and he felt weary. In the mortal realm, there was still the threat of Hu Qing. What he valued most was, in fact, Hu Qing, but it turned out to be nurturing trouble. Later, he set his eyes on Jian Wushuang, only to end up with disappointment. He turned out to be a mere pawn. Once betrayed in the past, he chose to overlook it all because everything was within his control, considering it a form of forgiveness. However, due to the connection with the starry sky, Jian Wushuang was removed from the list of inheritors. Now, there were only a few individuals catching his eye, and they were all lingering around the Dao Lord level. They were different from Jian Wushuang. He was on the verge of integrating the Dao, while those individuals still had a long way to go before achieving the same. Among the first batch of inheritors, the ultimate Dao practitioner of the Light Dao was like this. The origin source Dao had been perfected, but there was a significant gap in both cultivation realm and soul power. Jinling took over the Three Kings Court, dissecting the soul Dao inheritors inside and offering specialized insights. But even this wasn't enough. Each had its own flaws. There wasn't a truly perfect inheritor, someone who could relieve him of any pressure. The visitor from the starry sky was undoubtedly impressive, possessing formidable strength much like Jian Wushuang. However, beneath the surface there were questionable motives that instilled fear. There was a genuine apprehension that Xianyi's prophecy might come true, and the Qixin temple would unwittingly pave the way for someone else. The entire existence of the Qixin temple was at risk of being erased from the timeline, a bitter prospect. Zhenling, an integral part of Qixin, belonged to the Qixin temple by birthright. The situation was far from satisfying. Sigh. Exhaustion set in. The plan had been meticulously crafted, but its execution proved immensely challenging. Everyone, including Jinling, struggled in the relentless pursuit. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was essentially gambling with his own life, having never considered that Jinling could be sent to end him. Following the emperors, they entered a concealed space. "How many are yet to arrive?" inquired the supremely skilled individual who had earlier clashed with Emperor Lu Hua. "Elder Shadow 2 has fallen. Only Kuei 1 remains within the mine, disrupting the restrictions. Once the restrictions are breached, we can instantly depart." Elder Shadow 1 turned to glance at Jian Wushuang, expressing satisfaction at the relatively smooth progress. Those who dared to venture here did not harbor hopes of leaving alive. "Can't wait any longer, go directly to find Kuei 1, break the prohibition and leave directly. Lu Hua's strength is too strong. He can sweep us away in no time." There was a hint of worry in Shadow 1's eyes. Indeed, the strength of Emperor Lu Hua was not just hearsay. He had reached the pinnacle of the spatial realm, almost reaching the level of the universe, only lacking a secret technique. Once the secret technique was mastered, he would possess the strength of those divine generals under the command of Qixin back in the day. This time, several divine generals did not appear, and these people were considered lucky. If the divine General Main or Lord Yunzhong had descended, they could instantly annihilate them all. They were all ultimate emperors, and they had elevated the spatial realm to the level of the universe, each possessing their own peak secret technique. Moreover, all were masters of secret techniques. The divine generals could rival the half-step universe masters. Otherwise, Jinling wouldn't have allowed divine General Main and Lord Yunzhong to guard the Elder Palace. Buzz. The space hidden in the darkness seemed completely separated from this place. Outsiders couldn't enter at all. Even Emperor Lu Hua couldn't detect it. Outside, Emperor Lu Hua frowned and casually swept away those mysterious emperors. The mysterious pinnacle expert he had just fought had disappeared, and no matter how he searched, he couldn't find him. Then, he activated the array and found that Jian Wushuang had also disappeared. Jian Wushuang. It's better if all this is fake, or else you've dug yourself into a pit. Emperor Lu Hua began to regret. He had a part to play in releasing Jian Wushuang. That was unavoidable. At that time, it wasn't just the position of the palace lord that couldn't be maintained. It was feared that even life itself would be lost. Looking back now on the words spoken to Wuxia, he had no face to turn back. There was only one path to follow. Buzz. At the entrance of the Chenkuan cave, the restrictions were being worn away. The restrictions here were so formidable that even Supreme Peak experts couldn't break them. Breaking them required special means, and Jinling was well prepared. Relying solely on a few Supreme Peak experts was almost impossible. When these restrictions were created, they were designed to protect the top experts among the Supreme Peak. Even if the 18 divine generals gathered, they couldn't shatter it. But Jinling had a solution. Breaking the restrictions was Kuei 1, the Grand Commander of the Kuei organization in the earthly realm. His identity was extremely mysterious. Speaking of it, Jian Wushuang had once fought against him. On the border of the Maluo nation, he had experienced the opponent's methods. Kuei 1 was none other than the elder grandmaster of the Maluo. When he was madly expanding back then, it was for this day. Once he left, Maluo would perish without anyone to shelter it. Fortunately, he made all the necessary preparations and left many contingencies before departing. Even if he fell this time, there was no need to worry. He activated a series of imprints in his hands, forming a terrifying scroll. On that scroll, there was a blood-red totem. Jinling had informed him that once the totem was activated, it could break through all things. Because this was the totem of the Giant God Clan. Giant God Clan. Jinling was nothing more than an ordinary member of the Giant God Clan. Fuego and the Colossal Egg in the origin source were both of the Giant God Clan. In the starry sky, they were one of the most powerful clans. At birth, they stood at the pinnacle of the universe, capable of ruling over a river of time and space in the Grand Mahayana stage. In the vast expanse of the starry sky, with just over 100 rivers of time and space, there were only dozens of formidable individuals within the Giant God Clan who could control one. More than half of them could command a river of time and space. Such was the might of this formidable force. When Qixin reached its peak, it only controlled one river of time and space before eventually falling. The Giant God Clan, on the other hand, controlled dozens. It was no wonder that, with just one Fuego, they could annihilate the three kings. Various figures flashed on the totem, each one a super powerhouse from the Giant God Clan. At this moment, the prohibitions began to shatter. Hum! A shout from the starry sky instantly descended. Once again from the starry sky. Fortunately, it was only a voice, but its power was no weaker than that of the earlier sword strike. The sword was pure slaughter, killing all living beings. This shout, however, contained the essence of all things, directly shattering the prohibitions. Prohibitions shattered. Kuei 1 was very excited and quickly transmitted the message to Shadow 1. Swish! The space descended. Go! Everything went unexpectedly smoothly. In less than a quarter of an hour, they subdued Jian Wushuang, broke the prohibitions, and escaped. Buzz! In the mysterious space, a glow began to emerge. It was a teleportation array. Jian Wushuang stood among these people, watching with astonishment. The power contained in this teleportation array was much stronger than the strongest one he had seen in the White Tiger Temple. In the temple, the strongest teleportation array was for inter-realm travel. However, the power emanating from above was not even 1/10 as strong as this teleportation array. Where was it going to teleport him? Jian Wushuang was amazed in his heart. Leaving the Qixin Temple? Swish! When Lu Hua noticed that power, the teleportation array had already activated, and all the emperors in the mysterious space disappeared. At this moment, just a quarter of an hour later, Deputy Hall Master Zhong and Wu Shan arrived. Seeing the devastated mine and the desolate figure of Lu Hua, everything became clear. Where is Jian Wushuang? Deputy Hall Master Zhong asked anxiously. He had always felt that this matter must be related to Jian Wushuang. Emperor Lu Hua couldn't be bothered to deal with him and directly left the place. There was no need for him to clean up the mess. This time, the losses were not significant, but the reputation was tarnished. The space fire abyssal mountain was split into two, and the restrictions were shattered. As for those who fell, they were not much of a concern. This was just one of the many mines on the mountain. However, the strong from the Elder Palace also suffered losses. Although most of them were indigenous emperors, there were also some Tier 6 emperors who fell. The inheritors arrived last, only picking up the tail, naturally suffering no losses. Gong Miaoyi. Deputy Hall Master Zhong stood where Jian Wushuang and others had fought before, staring at Gong Miaoyi on the ground. They could do nothing about Jian Wushuang's swift departure. However, since Gong Miaoyi was left behind, not all was futile. Take her away. Escort her to the prison at Yuanyang Lake. I want to interrogate her personally. Vice Hall Master Zhong waved his sleeves, and several people behind him approached to restrain Gong Miaoyi's body. Then, together with Vice Hall Master Zhong, they left. Currently, there was no official announcement, and Vice Hall Master Zhong had inquired with Wu Zua. He found that Wu Zua had suddenly lost interest in the matter, harboring doubts and speculations in his heart. However, he wouldn't neglect anything that needed to be done. Wu Shan was different. He had long sensed that something was amiss. After Jian Wushuang and the mysterious Supreme Peak escaped, he no longer cared and returned to the Shao family. Everything returned to calm. Only Wu Zua remained anxiously waiting, realizing that he couldn't contact Jian Wushuang. In the origin source sea, Wu Zua paced back and forth, his heart filled with anxiety. Zhenling cast a glance at him, scolding, "What are you pacing for? You've made my eyes blurry. My lord, it's my incompetence." Wu Zua knelt directly. He had lost track of Jian Wushuang. He was supposed to ensure Jian Wushuang's safety, but now the person was missing, just like the previous time in the Northern Territory in the familiar place. Zhenling shook his head, saying indifferently, "TSK, TSK. Can't escape my palm." Gesturing to his own palm, Zhenling furrowed his brows. That faint aura was weakening. The string of beads he was playing with almost got crushed in his hand. Damn it! Sensing the weakened aura's location, Zhenling cursed angrily. Indeed, Jian Wushuang couldn't escape his grasp, but he couldn't reach Jian Wushuang's current location. It was a very special place. The first prison. It was a one-way journey. At the same time, he also discovered Fuego through Jian Wushuang. No wonder he couldn't find Fuego all along. He had entered the first prison, afraid of death. They couldn't escape from the Qixin Temple, and avoiding it was impossible. They entered the first prison. Wu Zua was startled by Zhenling, not daring to utter a word. Get lost! Zhenling directly overturned the chessboard. Wu Zua quickly retreated, slinking away. It seemed that this plan had completely failed. For who knows how many times, he had attempted to seize the position of the palace master and failed again. And he even lost track of Jian Wushuang. This time, he was completely unable to turn the tide. Even the various benefits he had given to Jian Wushuang could not be accounted for with Zhenling. This time, he lost both on both ends. Zhenling stood up, and this time it was his turn to pace. The first prison was very solid, but it couldn't withstand the peak Fuego. What would happen when Fuego, accompanied by Zhenling and Frelesa, came out. Zhenling was completely panicked. In his heart, he began to pray. Originally, he didn't believe in such things, but now he had no choice. He hoped that Jian Wushuang would stick to his principles and sacrifice the individual for the greater good. The first prison. Lord Fuego, this way, yes, right here. Please bear with me. My life power is somewhat violent. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in the void, directing a large group of emperors arranging a formation. This formation, with him as the core, was specifically designed to restore what Fuego had built. Through this formation, he acted like a source of life, constantly replenishing Fuego's strength and resolving the hidden injuries left by Shenling, now in the form of a humanoid exotic beast, watched in astonishment. He originally thought that Jian Wushuang would play some tricks, but he didn't expect such cooperation. Not only did he propose building the formation, but he also voluntarily mentioned how powerful his life power was and how it could help heal the hidden injuries. In this way, not only could Fuego recover to his peak, reaching the status of the peak Universe Master, but he himself could also restore to the level of the Universe Master. He had been suppressed since his birth, with a strength far inferior to Fuego, just entering the realm of Universe Master. Nevertheless, the ability to recover and escape was already a significant achievement. Suppressed for countless epochs, he did his utmost, calculating every step, arranging the 4 great secret realms, waiting for this day. But it was also because of Jian Wushuang's uniqueness that everything went smoothly. According to the original plan, Fuego was supposed to enter the first prison. He would be able to find an exit. However, after circling around, there was no exit at all. Originally on the brink of despair, all that was left of Phimisa was the origin source of all things. It was uncertain how much time was needed it to be born. Even if they could break free perfectly, their strength would only be at the level of a novice Universe Master, far from sufficient. Every time Zhenling made a move, he observed, realizing that this was no ordinary Universe Master. Now, Jian Wushuang had given him a pleasant surprise. The power of life. That was the power of all things, evolved to its most perfect form. With this power, he could not only escape the cage but also restore to his peak. It's almost time, we'll be able to leave soon, Shenling, also known as Phimisa, exclaimed with excitement. Since his birth, he had never been free, only able to sense the brilliance of the outside world through the origin source inheritance. Of course, not in the river of time in this space. It was in the starry sky, in the peak river of time where life flourished. That was his destination. Although they were assigned to different rivers of time or temporal rivers when they were born, not everyone could ultimately control one temporal river. There were also those who couldn't endure and sought refuge with stronger members of the same race. For example, Fuego, born much earlier than him, not only failed to control a temporal river but also encountered an unparalleled expert, narrowly escaping death. Fortunately, his survival skills were not weak, seeking refuge with a powerful member of the same race, finally stabilizing his footing. Compared to Fuego, he was still slightly more unfortunate. There were even more unfortunate cases. The one in the origin source, lacking even the ability to break out of the shell. With this realization, everything became clear. The 3 members of the giant god clan gathered, a rare occurrence in their history. Most members of the giant god clan roamed outside, either exploring or wandering, and those who thrived controlled a segment of time, becoming overlords in the starry sky. Opportunities to meet with fellow clansmen were scarce. Just as Shenling Phimisa envisioned the future, the formation he had set up began emitting tremendous power. Although the force was violent, whether it was a cultivator or an ordinary person, as long as it was a living being, they could feel the comforting sensation of that power. Practitioners within the formation felt their life force continuously rising. It worked! Jian Wushuang rejoiced inwardly. Even he hadn't expected success to come so quickly. He had previously feared the situation would deteriorate to this extent. Wuxia had reassured him repeatedly, promising to personally intervene if he found Shenling and Fuego. But what happened? Shenling didn't wait, and both Shenling and Fuego personally intervened. Although their strengths had not fully recovered to the level of a Universe Master, combined, they constituted the power of a Universe Master. What could he, a Dao Lord, do? He could only adapt to the situation and take it one step at a time. Now that the formation was successfully arranged, the only task left was to help Fuego recover his strength. This was the simplest step, but for him it was somewhat uncomfortable. He needed to use a lot of life power to nourish Fuego. This power he possessed. But trying to bring forth so much life power at once, even if he squeezed himself dry, it wouldn't come out. Jian Wushuang awkwardly reminded, Lord Xinling, the formation has been completed. You see, Fuego, the first to open his eyes, looked at Jian Wushuang. With this formation, the life force could be maximally transformed into his body, which was the perfect solution. Xinling chuckled. Speak without reservation. Lord Xinling, relying on this formation to restore the injuries on both of you would take at least 3 epochs. If you want it faster, I need the replenishment of the power of all things. Jian Wushuang diplomatically stated the treasures he needed. 3 epochs still left some room, as maintaining the power to operate the grand formation required that time. If he endured a bit more, 2 epochs would be sufficient. But he didn't want to waste so much time. Waiting for 2 epochs, several universe masters might emerge in the Qixin Temple. By then, if these 2 recovered and went out, there might be a major battle within the Qixin Temple. He couldn't afford to be caught in the crossfire. He couldn't just focus on the present. He had to find a smooth path for himself. If these 2 went out at their peak now, there might be no one in the outside world who could stop them. He was uncertain about the true strength of Xinling. Even if he could withstand them, it would likely be a standoff. Then, he could maneuver between the 2 parties. He couldn't allow either side to become too dominant. Otherwise, he would be rendered useless. A useless person generally didn't have a good fate. As if understanding his inner thoughts, Xinling made no promises but asked, How soon is the fastest? Give me an accurate time. 100,000 years. Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth. This time it was about speed. If the unceasing power of all things continuously supplied into his body, in 100,000 years, he could help Fuego restore to his peak strength. As for the injuries of the divine being, he had already assessed them. It would take him just 10 years to completely understand the opponent. Good. The divine being's expression brightened. Jian Wushuang didn't want to delay, and he certainly didn't want to prolong it. Naturally, the faster, the better. He had been observing the inheritors in the Qixin Temple. The strongest among them had already reached the strength of a half-step universe master. Jian Wushuang couldn't afford to drag it out any longer. Xinling Forlesa tossed a mustard seed towards Jian Wushuang and said, These treasures were accumulated by me in the 4 great secret realms over countless epochs. It should be enough. Anything extra is yours. Countless epochs. Treasures collected by various forces such as Shadow Sect and Kuei organization were numerous. Jian Wushuang took the mustard seed and probed with a thread of thought power. Despite his broad knowledge, he was still startled. The treasures among them exceeded his imagination. While not many were particularly precious, most were origin source treasures useful for the emperor. However, when accumulated, their value was immense. These treasures were enough to cultivate numerous emperor-level experts, even sustaining the powerful individuals of the entire northern region. The value within was evident. Indeed, these treasures were sufficient. And there were even more. Of course, no one would think that their treasures were too many. Xinling's perspective differed from his. What Xinling being yearned for was freedom. Once truly liberated, those treasures meant nothing. Not even a single strand of hair. Let's get started. Fuego couldn't wait any longer. He was eager to venture out. Jian Wushuang didn't waste words either. He nodded and, while devouring countless treasures, infused a massive surge of life force into the grand formation. 100,000 years, a mere blink for beings of their caliber. Yet, during these 100,000 years, Jian Wushuang couldn't divert his attention to cultivation, which was somewhat regrettable. He hadn't had the chance to comprehend the inheritance from Nye Yuan fully. But nearing the 9th level of the ultimate sword Dao, and with a bit of contemplation after leaving, creating a peerless masterpiece, he could seamlessly step into the 9th level. The Sword Dao and the Extreme Dao both achieved a perfect state. The culmination of the Dao was imminent. Jian Wushuang sighed deeply, thinking, I hope everything goes smoothly. For Fuego and his companions, everything happened swiftly, but for Jian Wushuang, these 100,000 years were no easy journey. Of course, Jinling in the outside world were just as anxious. Suddenly, 100 years after the disappearance of Fuego and the others, Jian Wushuang appeared. Jinling personally descended to the mortal realm, heading to the northern territory. By now, the mining site had returned to its original state. The guards at the entrance of the Chenquin cave were more vigilant than ever. After the lessons learned from the last incident, the Elder Palace had to take it seriously. Although the probability of another intrusion was low, they had to maintain appearances. Otherwise, they would be mocked by the temple for their inaction. When Jinling descended, no one noticed, as if they couldn't see him. The guards stood still, unaware that a powerful being had just walked in. Space! Jinling gritted his teeth, brows furrowed. His spatial origin had long reached a perfect level, encompassing the universe's space. The teleportation array from before was constructed within the gaps of space, and he immediately noticed something peculiar. Since others could build it, perhaps he could follow some traces and construct a teleportation array as well. Entering was easy, but getting out was another matter. Even if he entered now, defeated Fuego and the others, he might not be able to leave. What would he do then? Although he couldn't leave the Qixin temple, being trapped in the first prison with his main body was even more troublesome. Relying solely on his avatars, he couldn't preside over the Qixin temple. Outside, there was still a true master keeping a watchful eye. The previous true master could penetrate the Qixin temple with thought power. Who knew if, after escaping, they could return? He was indeed an incarnation after the fall of Qixin, but don't forget that true master was once one of the sources of Qixin. All of this was uncertain. In case he ended up being outsmarted, regret would come too late. Apart from him, sending someone else was not an option. Time reverses. Jinling's figure began to dim, and his body entered a pavilion. It was the pavilion in the origin source sea. The space where the teleportation array had once been established began to twist and change, everything reversing. The great battle from 100 years ago was vividly present. Jinling witnessed it all. He casually manipulated time, as if everything was a century ago. Seeing everything that would happen, Jinling's eyes narrowed. Especially the scene when Nye Yuan erupted. He watched in amazement. The lineage of the starry sky, that one sword strike, a sword that split the mountain, killing all enemies in front. Unfortunately, Jinling sighed. Such a talent falling was indeed not a small loss. If cultivated further, he wouldn't be weaker than those ultimate emperors. Can't wait any longer. Jinling pointed his finger, and the space reverted to its original state, his figure disappearing from the spot. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. Now he had to resolve everything. His true self couldn't go, so he had to send an avatar to take a look. If that wasn't enough, he would injure Jinling first. Even across countless spaces, even when the first prison was originally an entire universe, independent of the origin source of Qixin, with the strength of his true self, he could still injure Jinling. However, doing so would only address the symptoms, not the root cause, and might even make Jinling more desperate. Therefore, he had to go inside to see how things had developed to this point. He was aware of the life power within Jian Wushuang's body, and it probably wouldn't take more than a few epochs to restore Fuego's strength to its peak. Fuego at his peak was formidable. When suppressing Fuego back then, a divine master was mobilized. The strength of that divine master could rank in the top 3 in the original timeline. The so-called peak forces of the Three Kings Court were like blank paper before that divine master, easily torn apart. Universe Master. Jinling blinked. There was also a significant power gap among the Universe Masters, similar to the Emperor's level. The weaker ones were no match for the Supreme Peak. Back then, Zhuyun's strength was not weaker than those Universe Masters. The powerful ones were exceptionally formidable, like Qixin and the 3 great divine masters. However, Qixin's strength was once enough to overlook all universe masters in the Moro-temporal universe, ranking as the top-tier powerhouse. Even if the three great divine masters joined forces, facing Qixin was like a fleeting moment. Rip! Space tore open, revealing a rift, and when it reappeared, it was in another space. The sky here was dim, without sun or moon. The operation of space was also very peculiar. This place was not the space where the universe was born and evolved. It was artificially created. Black Tortoise Temple within the seventh world. As soon as Jinling descended, Xianxia sensed it, and his brows furrowed. The events in the four great secret realms, he had some knowledge of, understanding the severity of the situation. My lord, do you need my assistance? Xianxia didn't beat around the bush this time. He went straight to the point. Jinling didn't play coy either. Standing side by side with Xianxia, they stood atop a towering mountain, overlooking the entire vast world. This place was the seventh realm of Black Tortoise Temple, vast and expansive, no smaller than the heavenly realm. However, there wasn't a single living being here, or rather, no cultivators. All were puppets, yet these puppets seemed eerily human. At a glance, although the environment here differed from the four great secret realms, the puppets from various places resembled the cultivators in those realms. I'm planning to visit the first prison, Xianxia exclaimed. My lord, once you go, you won't be able to return. The first prison was a one-way passage, a fact known to all four temple masters. If we don't go within 3 epochs, they will come out. Who will stop Fuego then? Jinling turned to look at Xianxia. Fuego's strength could obliterate the Three Kings' Court. Though not on par with the Divine Master, it wasn't far off. He had the strength to resist, but only that. What if the opponent wreaked havoc inside the Qixin Temple? What would they do then? Hence, he had to enter the first prison. Whether in his transformed state or his true form, he should go and see. Xianxia lowered his head, sighing. My lord, what's the plan? With things having come this far, there was no other way. They could only go inside and see what to do next. Don't worry too much. If the Qixin Temple is really finished, you might truly be free, won't you? Jinling's words held some hidden meaning and a hint of dissatisfaction. Xianxia did indeed have some thoughts. If the Qixin Temple really fell, Xianxia could leave with the Black Tortoise Temple without any worries. The current Xianxia was no different from a cultivator, a fact that the other temple masters, and even Jinling, couldn't match. Jinling couldn't even leave, and the other temple masters couldn't cultivate. But Xianxia was different. He had undergone the transformation by that senior, making him no different from a cultivator. My lord, I was created by the Qixin. I owe everything to the Qixin Temple. Xianxia was moved. He had entertained such thoughts, but the Qixin Temple was still his home. However, Jinling shook his head and said, It's actually not bad. We must leave some tricks for the Qixin Temple. I don't blame you. In case of an emergency, he had even entrusted some matters to Xianxia. This time, I've come to seek your help. Rest assured, I won't treat you unfairly. Xianxia immediately bowed and said, Feel free to ask for anything. I won't say a second word. Normally, Jinling was decisive, but now in this posture, what else could he say? It was undoubtedly full support. I need you to urgently help me refine a corporeal puppet with the combat power of a universe master. Jinling spoke. Xianxia was taken aback. A puppet with the power of a universe master was not easy to create. The cost would be higher than cultivating an actual universe master. In general, no one would do such a thing. It was too wasteful. How long do you need, regardless of anything else? The crucial thing now is time. Xianxia pondered and said, 100 years. Although stated as a century, it was already the fastest time acceleration. In real time, it might be over 100 million years. Jinling nodded, saying, I only need the vessel. I'll provide the treasures. The faster, the better. After handing a mustard seed to Xianxia, Jinling didn't linger and left directly. He still had other matters to arrange. Since he was mobilizing a corporeal puppet, even though its strength could only reach the level of a universe master, he needed some helpers. Ordinary supremes naturally didn't catch his eye. God's tomb. This place was the most mysterious in Qixin Temple and also the home to the most powerful individuals. Although sparsely populated, this place gave birth to powerful beings from various backgrounds. In the realm of special life forms, born through countless epochs of accumulation, emerged several supreme-level powerhouses, distinct from ordinary practitioners. These special life forms were considered offspring of the Qixin Temple's origin source, lacking a true origin source themselves. Some possessed formidable divine bodies, inherently flawless. Deep within the god's tomb realm, there existed a purple pool, beneath which lay a complex formation. Ever since the passage between realms was opened, these exceptional beings, defying the natural order, were suppressed in this location. Among these formidable special life forms, any one of them could dominate an entire realm. In the heavenly realm, the mightiest native emperor, reaching the pinnacle of supremacy, only attained the realm of cosmic secret techniques and mastery. In comparison, they were akin to several palace masters of the Elder Palace, far from reaching the level of Grand Elder Guangmu. Yet, the special life forms suppressed in this place, each one of them possessed power comparable to Grand Elder Guangmu. Some even rivaled Wuxia or the divine General Mayin. Desolation. Beneath the blood-red array, on the desolate land, lay dozens of peculiar-looking beings, their faces contorted with ferocity, their bodies constantly suppressed and devoured by a force. This sensation had tormented them for countless years. As the Zhenling descended, these special life forms, exhausted and tormented, one by one stood up, glaring at the Zhenling with gritted teeth. It was the old man with a white beard before them who had oppressed them. These special life forms, born in the heavens and earth, were originally free and powerful creatures. How could they willingly accept being confined here? Therefore, they harbored resentment and fear towards the Zhenling. Although they dreaded the Zhenling, there was no fear in their hearts, but rather a strong determination to fight. Damn it! A special life form with spiral horns on its head glared fiercely at the Zhenling. The other special life forms also gathered around, staring at the Zhenling. The Zhenling swept his gaze around and chuckled. After all these years, you still haven't gotten rid of that foul temper. In fact, it hadn't been that long since he suppressed them. It had only been a few million years since the Qixin Temple opened. For these unruly special life forms, even a moment of confinement was unbearable. We, the innate war gods who wander the god's tomb, dared you to imprison us. Aren't you afraid of the rules of this heaven and earth? One of the special life forms said. The Zhenling, however, dismissed it. He controlled the rules of this heaven and earth. What did he have to fear? Tsk. You stubborn wooden blocks are truly unyielding. The Zhenling shook his head. Initially, he had planned to subdue these special life forms, considering their formidable strength compared to the waste in the Elder Palace. However, their stubborn temperaments proved to be a headache, so he suppressed them here. The Zhenling couldn't be bothered with further words. He straightforwardly said, "You want to get out, right? Well, now there's a chance." Upon hearing the opportunity to leave, the special life form's eyes gleamed with excitement, once again approaching. The leading special life form's expression changed, also tempted. However, aware of the opponent's peculiar methods and cunning nature, he hesitated and retorted, "Why should we believe you?" Zhenling, however, was disdainful. These fools, if they don't believe in him, who else can they believe in? In the Qixin Temple, his word was law. Without his command, these special life forms would be permanently suppressed. Within the god's tomb, any special life form with uncontrollable power would be suppressed. Zhenling coldly remarked, "If you don't believe, then stay here forever." Having said that, he pretended to leave. Those special life forms became anxious immediately. Several of the powerful ones, including the one with spiral horns, stepped forward to block Zhenling, not to attack him but out of curiosity. "The opportunity you mentioned, does it involve us submitting to you?" they inquired. "Not entirely. It's just that the requirement might be a bit dangerous. If you're afraid, forget it. Jinling casually replied, continuing to walk forward. The strongest among the special life forms began to discuss in hushed tones. As long as it didn't involve submission, they had no issues accepting it. As for fear, naturally born extraordinary beings, who among them would be afraid? Even if a formidable figure like Jinling personally descended, they wouldn't be scared. All right, we agree. The special life forms spoke up one after another. Jinling chuckled inwardly, finding these special life forms as thoughtless as ever. Compared to the Qishui on the Grave God Mountain, these beings here were like a group of children. Jinling revealed a smile and said, "That's more like it. You are the strongest beings in the 4 great secret realms. How can you be afraid of death?" Saying this, he glanced at a few hesitant special life forms in the corner. Upon hearing his words, the remaining special life forms gritted their teeth and also stepped forward. All 72 special life forms agreed. The Jinling voiced his request. He wasn't afraid of these special life forms changing their minds. Their reputation and dignity mattered most to them. A half-step universe master? Upon hearing Jinling's request, they revealed a hint of wariness. Facing a formidable enemy, instead of fear, a surge of fighting spirit overcame them. Staying within the god's tomb, they had never encountered powerful supreme peak cultivators. The strongest were the 13 spirit guardians. Their strength wasn't particularly formidable, but they possessed some kind of treasure that could specifically suppress them. Now, hearing Jinling's proposal to accompany them to slay 2 half-step universe masters, excitement brewed in their hearts. As long as this task succeeds, not only can I restore your freedom, but in the future you can freely traverse the 4 great secret realms, and I won't interfere as long as it's not wanton slaughter. I won't meddle in your actions. Jinling, fearing that these unique beings might not exert themselves, dangled a massive temptation. Upon hearing that success would grant them the ability to travel freely between the 4 great secret realms, these special life forms became even more enthusiastic. They had been in the god's tomb for countless epochs, living in the tomb since their inception. When the boundary between realms was broken, they were captured upon their first attempt to explore the other 3 realms and were confined here, harboring deep resentment. Now, with Jinling's promise that they could freely traverse the 4 great secret realms in the future, expressions of joy emerged. Each of these special life forms had a divine body that surpassed 60,000-fold. The strongest among them had already reached nearly 80,000-fold divine body, slightly stronger than Dragon God, comparable to Yun Zhong. If their freedom were truly restored, the 4 great secret realms would likely be thrown into chaos. The cunning Jinling, however, never intended to grant them true freedom. He wanted to lead these special life forms to the first prison, though his true form wouldn't be going. If his true form were to go, there would be no need for these special life forms' assistance. He intended to send the clone he had forged in the Black Tortoise Temple. Although the clone crafted by the Black Tortoise Temple moved through time and space with unparalleled grace, it ultimately lacked the strength of the true self and required some assistance. These special life forms proved to be the best allies. Each possessed formidable strength, brimming with a strong sense of combativeness. At the very least, they wouldn't idly stand by like those associated with Wuxia, daring to be indifferent. At that time, regardless of success or failure, they would all be permanently trapped in the first prison. Permanent solution. There was no need to worry about these individuals anymore. Granting them freedom would only leave behind a source of trouble for oneself, whether they succeeded or not. Despite the simplicity of these extraordinary beings' minds, when it came to causing trouble, no one could control them. When the time came, the White Tiger Temple would have to take drastic measures against them. Now, with chaos rampant in the earthly realm, it was already enough to give the White Tiger Temple a headache. If these special life forms were to enter the earthly realm in the future, it would truly lead to widespread disorder. Moreover, apart from the Jinling and a few temple masters and divine generals, no one else could subdue these special life forms. Having negotiated the terms, Jinling directly dismantled the formation in this area. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. The first prison, Jian Wushuang and the others did not notice Xin Ling's actions, especially Xin Ling Frelesa, who didn't even spy on the 4 great secret realms. Instead, he instructed those practitioners he had bewitched to cause trouble in the mortal realm, diverting attention. In the span of 100 years, Jian Wushuang never rested for a moment, and Fuego's strength had begun to rise. Jian Wushuang lowered his gaze, his thought power unabashedly scrutinizing Fuego. Since the other party had no reservations, he could not only sense the opponent's strength, but even see the origin source clearly. It was a multicolored origin source, a perfect spatial origin source, extremely solid. It was the cosmic space. There was also a slender origin source, the temporal origin source. The Dao Lord mastered origin sources such as Jian Wushuang's ultimate sword Dao and extreme Dao. After incorporating the primary origin source of their main practice into space, they became emperors. Even though he could now cultivate the spatial origin source, he had not yet merged the sword Dao and extreme Dao into the spatial origin source. The stronger his spatial origin source now, the smoother the integration of the Dao in the future. However, cultivating the spatial origin source in the posture of a Dao Lord was already very slow and extremely difficult. Reaching higher realms seemed unlikely. Just like now, he had already mastered 99% of the black hole, yet still couldn't take that final step. If he stepped into the Emperor realm, he might instantly grasp the realm of the black hole, perhaps even rapidly reaching the peak of the black hole realm. Now a Dao Lord, he found himself constrained. The Emperor corresponded to space, while the Universe Master corresponded to time. The prerequisite for becoming the Universe Master was to perfect the cultivation of the spatial origin source. When he was a Dao Lord, the cultivation of the origin source did not need to be perfect to perform Dao merge. However, upon reaching the level of Emperor, spatial perfection became a necessity. To condense space and form a universe was the key. Without reaching this point, one could not impact the position of Universe Master. After becoming the Universe Master, the cultivation still involved the origin source but at a higher level. The temporal origin source. It was a more unimaginable origin source, controlling the cosmic time. Space and time were the 2 pinnacle origin sources. Mastering the complete spatial origin source meant becoming the Universe Master. But what if one mastered the complete temporal origin source? Jian Wushuang pondered in his heart. He knew little about the Universe Master, harboring many doubts within himself. After becoming the Universe Master, one could control a trace of the temporal origin source, a fact he was aware of. However, perfecting the cultivation of the temporal origin source was something he dared not speculate about. Time, one of the strongest rules. Perhaps only the Universe Master would truly comprehend it. Just perfecting the spatial cultivation qualified one to enter the ranks of the Universe Master. But what would happen if both were perfected and then merged into one? What level would that be? After observing Fuego's origin source, he felt a great curiosity. Firstly, because back in ruins of the Three Kings Court, he had encountered Master Xianxia and wanted to know what kind of existence he was. His strength was at least at the level of the Universe Master and possibly even stronger. The sky-sight heavenly chessboard left for him was a treasure of time and space. Even the powerful Moro timespace only had a few similar items. He never expected that the gift from Master Xianxia, given in other domain realms, though special at that time, now seemed trivial in comparison, not considered precious. But now it was different. He felt a sense that he was getting closer to the secrets with Master Xianxia. In the beginning, there was a purpose behind cultivating him, and all of this needed an explanation. The closer he got, the more perplexed he became. And what about the experience in the starry sky back then? Was it related to teacher Xianxia? Jian Wushuang shook his head gently. Perhaps that wasn't too closely connected. However, the Qixin Temple definitely had some kind of association with teacher Xianxia. Even the first true king back then couldn't be considered a disciple. The manipulation of the chessboard was a grand scheme orchestrated through the hands of the other party. The planning behind all of this was too vast. The other party was none other than the first true king among the three kings, a powerhouse under the Universe Master. All of this didn't catch Xianxia's eye. The distant Xin Ling, sensing a slight weakening of Jian Wushuang's mental strength, opened his eyes and looked towards him. "What's the matter? Something on your mind?" Xinling Frelesa asked calmly. For Jian Wushuang, he was taken quite seriously. If he could successfully escape from the Qixin temple this time, he wouldn't mind taking Jian Wushuang along. The life power within Jian Wushuang would be beneficial for him to establish a stable foothold in other temporal spaces. The Universe Master was formidable, especially since Fuego had reached the pinnacle of the Universe Master. No matter where he went, he would be a dominant force. But that was still far from enough. To rule over a temporal space, the required strength had to be at least on the level of the existence in the Qixin Temple. They still had a long way to go before reaching that level. Hearing Xinling initiate the conversation, Jian Wushuang was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected Xinling to remain so indifferent even now. In normal circumstances, this wasn't the most urgent moment. Why would Xinling care about him now? This left him feeling pleasantly surprised. At the same time, he began to worry, wondering if the other party harbored any conspiracy in their heart. Although he was currently like a fish on the chopping block, even if the other side were to regain their strength, they probably wouldn't do anything drastic to him. After all, his life power was quite special, and no matter who it was, it held great utility. Jian Wushuang pondered for a moment before expressing the doubts in his heart. Upon hearing this, Xinling Frelesa revealed a faint smile. He had no intention of hiding anything regarding this question. As a Universe Master, although he had encountered fewer of them compared to ancient giant god clans like Fuego, his experiences were not as extensive. However, based on the memories passed down through inheritance, he had some understanding. The Universe Master is not as powerful as you imagine, or rather, in other dimensions, it's quite ordinary and commonplace. Upon hearing these words, Jian Wushuang was initially puzzled, but soon he grasped the meaning. Their perspectives were different. The other was born as a Universe Master. Not to mention the mortal stages, even the mastery of Tao was innate for them, directly traversing numerous levels to reach the pinnacle. However, in the eyes Xinling, it was merely a starting point. In this way, for the giant god clan, the Universe Master was indeed simple and ordinary. "My lord, could it be that you were born with complete mastery over space?" Jian Wushuang asked in confusion, skeptical about this. He found it hard to believe that one could be born as a Universe Master with full mastery over space. Shouldn't that be the domain of beast gods born as natural kings? Frelesa responded casually, "It's not entirely so. Judging by the standards of cultivators like you, indeed, mastery over space is required to step into the role of a Universe Master. However, don't forget, the giant god clan is not comprised of cultivators." As he spoke, Frelesa's eyes exuded an imposing kingly aura.